Venerable, may I do the mandala offering?
I think a good idea, Shankar. We're just thinking, everybody, we're going to offer all the marvelous things of the world, pile them all up and offer to the Buddha as a request for the teachings. That's the plan, thinking like that.
I'll wait so that everyone can see it.
Yeah, good.
There we go.
Thinking this way, okay. Imagining, using your creative imagination, offering to the Buddha.
Saji Paki Juksing Meto Tramri Rab Lingji Nide Gan Pari Sangye Jindu Mikte Uvargi Joku Namada Jing La Chupasho. A holy and perfect pure Lama from the clouds of compassion that form in the skies of your Dharmakaya wisdom, please release a rain of vast and profound Dharma, precisely in accordance with the needs of those of us to be trained. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kamni Adayami.
Thank you, Shankar. Wonderful. So now our little prayer to set ourselves in the right direction, our motivation. We can have that prayer. This is the refuge prayer. Have we got it, do you think, Sheila? There we go. This is the one. That's it. So as always explaining, it's two things. First lines are expressing our reliance on the Buddha and his teachings. So if we figure we're kind of formally a Buddhist, then we think that, reminding ourselves of our reliance. And then the second two are this altruistic motivation that we're stating for this activity that we're doing of listening to these teachings. We're thinking by the virtuous karmic seeds we plant in our mind from listening to these teachings, may they ripen in the future as our Buddhahood, which is our potential, so we can be a benefit to others. That's the plan. That's the idea. Okay. Sangye Chadang Soke Chognam La Janchu Badu Dagni Kyapsu Chi Dagi Chunyen Gipe Sonam Ki Drola Penche Sangye Drupa Shog Sangye Chadang Soke Chognam La Janchu Badu Dagni Kyapsu Chi Dagi Chunyen Gipe Sonam Ki Drola Penche Sangye Drupa Shog Sangye Charang Soke Chognam La Jangchu Badu Dagni Kyapsu Chi Dagi Chunyen Gipe Sonam Ki Drola Penche Sangye Drupa Shog. All right. Thank you so much. Okay, everybody. So, okay, the brave attitude. So why is it called a brave attitude? And we wouldn't think of, normally if you think of love and compassion in our world, when we think of a compassionate person, we think of a kind person who helps animals, who helps sick people, who does job that's about helping people. We think that's compassionate. Then we think of brave attitude. We have to look at what that means, brave attitude of a bodhisattva. So I think the key to understanding this is to understand the level of compassion that the Buddha is telling us on the Bodhisattva path that we're capable of. And if we think about, and basically it's compassion Basically, the Bodhisattva is a person who's gone through the stages of the path, has got renunciation, understands suffering, understands karma really well, wants to be, really has a serious renunciation of suffering and its causes, understands very deeply what causes suffering. And this is a crucial thing, which we'll describe, that's necessary to really have the level of compassion that we're going to describe, to really understand karma, which is suffering and its causes. This is the basis. Then you get to this level where you practice the Bodhisattva path and you then cultivate this outrageous attitude called bodhicitta, which is on the basis of extremely profound levels of love and compassion for every single sentient being. Now, on the face of it, that's kind of shocking, because if we look in the world, and the usual view we have of compassion, almost exclusively, I think if we look at what we think of compassion as, is compassion for suffering people. So then what we look at is what is suffering. And this is the key to the radical difference between the compassion that we have and what we mean by suffering, and the compassion that the Buddha is saying we can accomplish, which is the compassion of the Bodhisattva and the level of suffering that he's describing. And that's why we have to understand what he's saying in order to understand this level of compassion, because it sounds insane to say that you've got compassion for every single person. It just doesn't make sense. Why? Is simply because the definition of suffering that we tend to take for granted is, as far as Buddha is concerned, the first level of suffering only. Buddha asserts different levels of suffering. And this is why it's crucial to really understand bodhicitta and the compassion wing. You have to have done some level of the wisdom wing first, which is where you learn to understand suffering and its causes, which is the Four Noble Truths. So when you study the Four Noble Truths, who is Buddha talking to there? Obviously, he's talking to you. He's telling you about your suffering, and he's telling you about what you've done to cause that suffering, and he's giving you the methods to get rid of suffering. That's really what understanding the Four Noble Truths is all about. It's the very basis of getting this really powerful first level of realization, which is called renunciation. You want to renounce suffering and its causes. So obviously, if you want to understand, renounce suffering and its causes, and equally, if you want to have compassion, which is compassion for people who are suffering, you've got to be on the same page as the Buddha in terms of what suffering is. And that's the crucial one to understand, because it's radically different from the usual view we have of what suffering is. And if we just hear the Bodhisattva teachings without referring to the earlier teachings, which is the teachings about renunciation, which is what you learn in the Four Noble Truths, which is what you learn on the wisdom wing, you simply won't understand. It just sounds too peculiar. So, okay, we've got to get right back to basics. What is suffering? It's the First Noble Truth, Buddha's very first teaching. So suffering to the Buddha, he describes it in terms of 3 stages, 3 levels of suffering. The first one is the one that we all understand. And that's when the bad things happen. So Buddha's got a broader view of this too, and he talks about different realms of existence. But here, let's even forget about that. Let's look at the suffering that we understand in this human realm. So we know very well when we say, so what Buddha means by the suffering of suffering is what we know is suffering. And basically, it's when the bad things happen, when you're sick, when your boyfriend leaves you, when really awful things happen. Look at the world. It's when the drop, people in war zones, people who are poor, the homeless people, the sick people who get raped and harmed. That's what we mean by suffering. And that is probably exclusively the compassion we have for people who are experiencing that. So then that's fine. We've got to have that one first. Perfect. Now, the next level of suffering is called the suffering of change. And it sounds kind of rather boring, suffering of change. What does that mean, Well, it's simply Buddha's stating that what we mean by happiness, happy feelings, and the way we get that happiness, which is on the basis of getting an object of attachment, a boyfriend, a handbag, a cake, a nice event, a job. Think about it. That's what we mean by happiness. So what Buddha is telling us is, I'm sorry, guys, that what you think of as happiness, and then referring to the methods you use to get it, Because of this, this happiness will not last. The words are really simple, but we don't like to hear it because it sounds kind of mean. It sounds kind of depressing. Well, okay, you're happy, but don't you worry about it. It's not going to last. So we think it's kind of mean of Buddha to point this out. So we'd rather not look at it. But he's explaining his logic for why what we call happiness, it is happiness to some degree, but he gives us great details about how the level of happiness that we have and the methods we use to get it. He says these are guaranteed to cause those happy feelings to change into the first kind of suffering, which is when the bad things happen. And I think at the simplest level, use the example of, suffering is when you're hungry, let's say. Suffering is when you're hungry. And then happiness is what you get when you eat the food, isn't it? It stops the hunger. So the level of happiness that we understand, and when we could spend, there's really in-depth explanations, quite technical explanations in the Buddhist teachings for Buddha's understanding of this, without he's not just trying to be mean to us. So we have to analyze this carefully to really understand what he's talking about, because he's wanting us to renounce not only the first kind of suffering, but the second one as well. Which basically, another way of putting it is, okay, so a simple example, if you're hungry, that's called suffering. So the solution is to get food, and that's called happiness, isn't it? But what Buddha's saying is, if you look carefully, that if you're convinced that food, that meal is the cause of happiness, and on a simple level it stops the feeling of the gross suffering of being hungry, it then triggers pleasant feelings. And then he says, what happens is, because it's driven by attachment, and attachment's never satisfied, you'll keep putting that food in the mouth because you're not really getting satisfied yet. It's triggering some happy feelings, but you're not fully satisfied. So you think the next mouthful of food might do it. Well, the next mouthful of food, and before you know it, when you look at that food on the plate, which 5 minutes before looked so divine, you wanted to faint with pleasure, now looks revolting because you've overeaten, and now that happy feeling has literally changed into the suffering of being now stuffed. Now, the fact is, this is such a simple example, it's embarrassing. But we know it's true, but we don't know any other method to get happy, so we just kind of accept it. We think Buddha's being mean in pointing it out. And he is basically saying the happiness that we get, and he calls this samsaric happiness, the happiness that we get, and the methods we use to get it, which is to say to get the object of attachment, is a guaranteed method to stop the suffering fairly quickly, and it inexorably becomes another kind of the suffering of suffering, being full, wanting to vomit. The more the Buddha's telling us basically that our methods for getting happy, which is to get an attachment object, is a method, as my mother used to tell me, because I was always attached to my food as a child. She'd say, and I'd think and think and think about it, she'd say, Bobsy, the more you get, the more you want. We know it already, and this is profound. This is what Buddha's trying to get us to see. This is the second kind of suffering, which is the suffering caused by attachment. So it's really hard to hear it because it sounds kind of mean. Point is, Buddha's saying, you think you're happy, but just you wait. We don't like to think about it. And then when we do think about it, we get all fundamentalist and think, I'm not allowed to be happy. I'm not allowed to have chocolate cake. Then we become ridiculous, So we've got to analyze it carefully. So the only point I'm getting at here is this is a subtler level of suffering, much deeper level of suffering. And so first of all, if we have compassion for people in the first group, the starving ones, the poor ones, the sick ones, they're the ones who've got the suffering of suffering. They're only the ones we've got the compassion for, because the moment you have people who don't get starving, who don't get sick, who don't have the suffering of suffering, which means the nice people, the happy people, the rich people, with lovely houses and jobs. That's this group. And there's no way in the planet we would think, why would I have compassion for them? They're happy, we would say. Look at ourselves. You only think you're suffering when the boyfriend leaves you. You don't think you're suffering when you've got the boyfriend. And this is what Buddha is trying to get us to see. It's a more nuanced, more subtle level of suffering. And so when we understand it first for ourselves and realize, oh my God, I do not want that suffering. I want to give up attachment, which is the cause of it. That's a pretty subtle level of, that's a pretty profound level of renunciation. So then when you know it for yourself, now you look at the world and go, oh my God, that's like 90 more, that's millions more people I've now got to have compassion for, instead of just the ones who are poor and sick. And that's probably the majority on the human planet. Now suddenly the rich ones and the famous ones, you mean I've got to have compassion for them too? Yes, you do, but only you can once you know it for yourself. If you don't understand attachment, if you don't understand the suffering that attachment causes, then it is literally impossible to have renunciation of that suffering. And therefore it is impossible to have compassion for people in the same boat. That's why you've got to go to junior school and high school first. You can't leap ahead into the compassion wing and understand the Bodhisattva path, the level of compassion that the Bodhisattvas have, without first understanding it yourself. It's just impossible, literally impossible. But that's not the end of it. There's even a subtle level of suffering. And this is the hardest one for us to understand. And this is the crucial one that is underpinning all the others in the Buddhist teachings, in Buddha's analysis. And this is the point at which he diverged from all the marvelous Indian thinkers before him. They have methods for getting rid of suffering, the gross seven. They have methods for getting rid of attachment. He got it from them. He didn't make it up, but he saw that they didn't go far enough. They've still got all pervasive suffering, the conditioned suffering. And this is a bit subtle for us. We don't get this one. So so there's the suffering of suffering, which is having the bad things happen. There's the suffering of change, which is what appears to be happiness on the surface, but which, because it's driven by attachment, turns into the suffering of suffering and becomes the worst suffering again. And then the third one is the fact that put it this way, that basically is that you've still got. Okay, so in relation to the delusions in the mind, which we talk often enough, when you begin to subdue the suffering of suffering and you give up the causes of it, what you've given up is harming others, and you're giving up the anger that causes you to harm others. Now you get to the next level and you give up the suffering of change. What you're giving up is attachment. The deeper delusion that is underneath anger. Now you get to the third one, all pervasive suffering. And what you're going to give up there is ego grasping, the root delusion, ignorance that believes in the intrinsic me by realizing emptiness. So the first method to get rid of the suffering of suffering is go to junior school, abide by the laws of karma, and stop harming other people. Then you go to high school and you give up anger. Then you go further and you give up the suffering of change by giving up attachment. And then third, you go all the way and you give up all suffering. You give up pervasive suffering, conditioned suffering, by realizing emptiness and cutting the root to all rebirth altogether. Then you're rid of the three kinds of suffering. So this you learn in the Four Noble Truths in the first scope, in the second scope, the first and second scopes of the Lam Rim, in junior school and high school, as I like to call it. And this is the basis of your renunciation, which really is like compassion for yourself. You understand this suffering, you understand the causes, and you are fed up with it and you want to give it all up. That's a pretty profound level of realization, I tell you. Even wanting to give up attachment is so primordial. As Lama Zopa says, you've got renunciation when just the thought of another moment of attachment is so repulsive. It's like being in a septic tank. Now, this is clearly too advanced for most of us. Most of us happy not to have the suffering of suffering, happy to give up anger, but to give up attachment is unbelievably subtle, unbelievably profound. So don't have false expectations of yourself. Don't push yourself further than you can. But when we really understand how primordial just attachment is, forget the root delusion, which you uproot by realizing emptiness, to give up the third level, the most pervasive, the basis of all the other sufferings. So it's really quite a profound view, and it takes a lot of analysis. You can't just sort of think you've got renunciation because I've given up sex, drugs, and rock and roll. No, not enough. You've got to understand the technology of attachment and how it's connected to feeling and how it's connected to what happiness is and what suffering is. We have to really do deep analysis, you know. It's not easy. And then to give it up, I mean, we won't be giving up attachment and practically until we realize emptiness. It's so primordial, so completely pervasive, you know. So this is the first one in second scopes. This is the first level of practice for ourself. And it's only the level to which we've got these understandings that is the degree to which we can have compassion for others. Our level of compassion is utterly linked to our levels of renunciation. You can't see them separately. Not possible. So the levels of compassion that we have, which is just for the suffering people, it's already stupendous. So many people have so much compassion. But the tragedy is it drags us down because we don't understand attachment. So that's why we have very low level of tolerance when it comes to other people's suffering. Forget your own suffering. But we have such a low level of tolerance when it comes to having compassion for others. Either we get so angry and we want to go and drop bombs on all the people who are causing the suffering, or we get so depressed we want to kill ourselves. This is because we haven't done the earlier work. We haven't done the work of giving up, understanding suffering and its causes. So when you've begun to get some renunciation, you already become much more content and fulfilled. And then the degree of your compassion is far more profound. And you won't give up, because the key characteristic of the Bodhisattva, why they're called the brave Bodhisattvas, is because they've got this fierce determination never to give up. And the more suffering for them, it's the more grist for their mill. But as if we just leap in to try to help people who are suffering, it'll exhaust us because we haven't done the earlier work. That's why our compassion is so limited now. It either makes us depressed or it makes us angry. But if you've gone beyond attachment to some degree, beyond depression, beyond anger, your compassion will be limitless and it will inspire you to never give up to help others. It does the exact opposite for us. We have to have breaks. We have to have time off. We have to have a holiday. We have to have a retreat. We get burned out, as we say. That's not because of the suffering. And this is a major point to understand. We have a deep assumption in the world that you suffer when you see compassion and you suffer in your job of helping people. No, you don't suffer because of other people's you don't suffer because of a compassion, and you do not suffer because you see suffering. We suffer because we haven't given up attachment and anger and all our own fears. They are why we suffer when we see other people suffering. That's why our compassion is so limited, you know. We've got to understand this. It's not the usual way of talking. So Bodhisattva is a person who's got profound renunciation, understands the three levels of suffering, and is working intensely hard if not having already accomplished, giving up the first kind of suffering, giving up the second kind of suffering, giving up attachment, giving up delusions, and really maybe got a profound understanding already of emptiness in order to cut the root of the third kind of suffering, the one that is the motor that propels us from life to life in samsara. That's the person who can then have this fierce compassion, because the more you see the suffering of change and all pervasive suffering within yourself, then you see it in others. This is so obvious. You know, if you've never thought about nutrition, and you just have a healthy body, you eat what you like, and you see other people who are unhealthy, you can kind of see a little bit the problem, the poor people, you know, look at that, everything they eat makes them suffer. But if you start to have problems with nutrition and you start to suffer, and then you find the solution, and you know what the suffering is and you know the causes, and now everywhere you go on the street, you're going to say, oh my God, look at that person suffering. Oh my God, look at that person suffering. You see it far more profoundly because you recognize it in yourself. Anybody who's been an alcoholic and then given it up, they're the ones who can understand other alcoholics because they understand that suffering and its causes. So you've got to be conscious of it yourself before you have real compassion for others. Otherwise, the compassion we have, like I said, is based on attachment and is based on anger. So you either have a big heart and you rush out to help everybody, but it drags you down to hell because you get exhausted and depressed, or you get angry and who caused this suffering, and you want to go out and then drop bombs, you know, or go out and demonstrate and shout and yell and find the person to blame. So you get exhausted either way. There's very limited compassion because we haven't done the earlier work, because we don't know what suffering and its causes are, and we don't understand attachment and our own delusions, and that they are the cause of our suffering. So this is why the Bodhisattvas look outside you know, we have to practice this and see the people with suffering of suffering. Yep. And now this is the point. This is the point, which is so different from us in our world. When we see a person who's poor or suffering, or, you know, in a war zone, we have compassion for the victims, but the next second we're thinking who to blame. So we then get angry. It turns immediately into anger or depression because we don't know why it is happening. So that's why understanding karma, understanding suffering and its causes gives us incredible inner strength, because we know why these people are suffering. And that's the basis not of blame, but of anger, of compassion. Right now, when we hear karma, we use it in the wrong way. We think, oh, well, all those poor people, they're suffering because of their own past miserliness. Well, let them suffer. We completely misunderstand it. Understanding karma and why a person is suffering is the basis of your compassion for that person. Because out of their own ignorance, just use the simple example of a person who doesn't know nutrition, out of their ignorance about what is good food and what is not, and they really don't realize that what they're eating is causing themselves suffering. You don't get angry at the person, you have compassion for them out of their ignorance. That's everybody. Because nobody on the planet thinks that they're the cause of their own suffering. Everybody thinks it's somebody else. They say that's the basis of the greatest compassion of the Bodhisattvas for all of us, that we think everybody else is the cause of suffering. We're looking everywhere else for the causes of suffering except here. This is the tough one. This is an intense one. When we've got it, it's profound, I tell you. Because everybody's ignorant of karma. Cause and effect. I mean, it's not a view that's common, is it? That you've got a past life and that this present life, you're experiencing the fruits of all your virtue, which is your happiness, and you're experiencing the fruits of your non-virtue, which is your suffering. Because when you understand the causes of suffering, you also understand the causes of happiness, and you know that you're in charge of both of them. This is already a profound realization, and this is what renunciation is the basis of, you know. It's the basis of renunciation. And then it becomes the basis of compassion. You only have compassion for all the poor people who are having bad things happen to them, the poor, the sick, the terrorized, the ones being harmed, raped, murdered. You have incredible compassion. But the reason you have compassion is because they caused it. That's the extra piece that's massively powerful and necessary to think about. And we really have to think about it because it doesn't sit comfortably with us. And until we work it out for ourselves and our own suffering, it'll never sit comfortably for us thinking of others. Then you've got the second level of suffering, which is all the happy, rich, famous people so you rejoice as a result of their past virtue, as a result of their past generosity. They have money and a beautiful house and a job. As a result of their non-killing, they have a healthy body. As a result of all this virtue in the past, this is the worst. This is why this is a more heavy duty level of suffering. They appear, everything is divine. Their life is in heaven. But it is the result of their past virtue, so you rejoice. But because of unbelievable attachment now, we cling to it and believe it's permanent and believe, aren't I lucky? There's the hubris of aren't I important? Aren't I lucky? That self-satisfaction we have. Look at it, and we believe it's permanent, and we believe it's somehow good luck. Aren't I clever? I must have earned all this money. Or aren't I lucky? The universe has been kind to me. And we don't realize that this also is the fruit of our past virtue, and we PISS it down the toilet with our attachment. That's the tragedy. That's the basis of compassion for those people. But we think of compassion sometimes in a sentimental way, kind of all gooey and yucky, you know. No, compassion is very strong. It's got wisdom in it. When it's got wisdom in it, which means you know why the people are suffering, it's got like strength and courage, and you only want to help. And then the most primordial level of suffering, that nobody understands emptiness, nobody understands ego grasping, nobody understands that ignorance is the root delusion, which is the one that believes in the intrinsic me and intrinsic everything else, and that keeps us going for countless eons, realm after realm after realm, never ending. So that everybody is in the same boat. So that includes, of course, if we understand all the realms of existence that Buddha's talking about, the lower realms, the hell beings, the spirits, the animals, the trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of creatures, animals, not to mention the few tiny percentage of humans, you know, then you have compassion for every single sentient being, because out of our ignorance, we have created our own suffering. We have created all these realms of existence, and there's no creator up there running the show. There's no boss, there's no punisher, there's no rewarder. That's the worst suffering of all, that there's no one else to blame. We are in charge. This is the basis of compassion of the Bodhisattvas. And that causes them to get more energy. Every time they see suffering, it increases their wish to never give up becoming a Buddha. Whereas for us, it increases our exhaustion. It increases our depression. It increases our anger. And it increases our confusion, because 99% of the time we suffer when we see suffering out there is because we don't know why it's happening. We grow crazy. Why is this happening? That's why we suffer so badly, because we don't have an answer. So, of course, we're using Buddha's here. I'm not asking you to believe it. I'm just stating you Buddha's case, Buddha's deal, what he has found from his own experience to be the truth. It's up to us to use that. So, of course, the other, again, the point of the level of compassion that you're able to accomplish is equal to the level of attachment and anger and jealousy that you get rid of. You can't have masses of anger and jealousy and then masses of compassion. That's a bizarre concept, because they're opposite, you know. They're completely opposite. One counteracts the other. So that's why you've got to do the wisdom wing first. Renunciation, give up your own suffering, give up the causes, understand karma, understand the mind, understand anger, understand attachment, and give them up, and that naturally just allows the virtues to come to the surface. And then the Bodhisattva wing, you proactively grow those virtues. You grow your love, your compassion in those series of techniques, you know, that culminate in the accomplishment of bodhicitta, this outrageous attitude. And then and part of the methodology, this is where the brave bodhisattva comes in. So let's just leap into the deep end. Let me see if I put it into our course notes. Maybe I didn't. I'll have a look. Let me just see for a second what I put into our course notes. I hope you've all got the course notes there. I prepared course notes for you all. They must be in the, where would they be, Shankar? Oh, Shankar's not there. So where would they be, Shaila?
If you go to
course notes
website and click on this, on the page for this course, it will be in there. Would you like me to share it now?
Well, no, as long as people know it's there, because there's course notes being prepared. I've prepared course notes for all of you, so that'd be really helpful if you can have those course notes and have a look at them. The stuff that's in there that you probably already read from other teachings, but it will be excellent to be conscious of them and know that they're there. So I just have to find them myself.
We will add them to the chat. One moment.
Can't find my, I don't know how to show sidebar. There it is. Okay, let me just find the course notes and I'll see what I've put in. If I put this text in, I was going to go through the 8 verses of, which is the most radical practice for getting, really talk about courageous, brave bodhisattvas. Let me see if I can find it.
That is in the course note.
Let me see. Oh, no, I don't know where it is. Where have I done it? Talk to Nobiline. Hang on a second. Mahamudra, Tara, death. No, where have they gone? What have I done with them? I don't know what I've done with them. Oh gosh, what have I done with those course notes? I'm sorry. I'm gonna be long. Sent. Maybe I sent them to Dundra this morning.
Venerable Robina, I'm posting the course notes in the chat box right now.
Oh, that people can have it if they want. That's a good idea. Thank you for doing that. That's great. So here, let me just see if no, I didn't do it. I thought I might have put the 8 verses in. Oh, yes, I did. Okay, chapter 6. So if you've got your course notes there, keep your own course notes. Don't show it on the screen. We're going to go through these 8 verses, okay? This is a radical method for accomplishing bodhicitta. This is a radical method. And talk about, you're going to see, talk about courageous. We've really got to, and without understanding what I've just talked about already, it's not possible to understand this level of practice. This is really like the outrageous level of practice. Page 61, chapter 6. And you've got to have, in other words, Pabonka Rinpoche says that this level of practice You need to be a suitable vessel. And a suitable vessel is obviously a person who's done the earlier work. You're going to read each verse is outrageous. You're going to hear it. And there's no reference point for this in ordinary daily life's view. You've got to understand so carefully. And the other one is too, because these different levels of practice are according to your capacity. So if you are not capable of this level of practice, you don't even pretend to try. That would be just plain foolish. And I think this is something we don't quite understand when it comes to spiritual teachings. You know, we might think that Tantra is high. Well, my goodness, this is incredibly high practices. You've got to understand the logic behind these teachings. This is like in the various methods for accomplishing bodhicitta. It's often divided into about 12 little techniques. There's different ways of doing. There's two methods for getting bodhicitta. One is called the 6 causes and 1 effect, and one is called exchanging self for other. And there's a system Courtin Rinpoche uses that has about 11 techniques, which is a combination of both. So in the more advanced levels of these 11 stages, these 11 techniques or 12, whatever it is, 11, this is the method that's used. It's called exchanging self for others. So we'll go through each one. We'll just try and show the logic behind these practices. Because if you don't understand the logic of them, they're just too weird for words, you know. Okay, verse 1 sounds so simple. But this says, determined to obtain the greatest possible benefit from all sentient beings. Now, our first instinct is that should say for all sentient beings, but it's got a very specific meaning here. So let me explain. If you're on the Bodhisattva path, then your goal is to become a Buddha. Your fierce, single-pointed goal is to do everything you can to lessen your delusions, to lessen your nonsense, to grow your love, to grow your compassion, so that you can eventually become a Buddha, because you're driven by the wish to be a benefit to all sentient beings. So on your path to getting there, sentient beings are like grist for your mill. If you're on the wisdom wing, the best way to do the wisdom wing is really like the retreat mode. The best way to do the wisdom wing to get renunciation is give up sex, drugs, and rock and roll, become a monk or nun, and go to the mountains. That's the quickest, most direct route. You leave sentient beings alone, and you go and you do all the inner work, and you get renunciation. Now, if you like, you can come down the mountain and you can join the universe and all the crazy sentient beings, because they are now your grist for your mill. So the point here is this. You're going to be with sentient beings. Now, okay, you're trying to get compassion, right? You're trying to get these outrageous levels of compassion. So think about it. What do you need in order to get compassion? You need to have contact with suffering sentient beings. It's very simple. If you're trying to become a doctor, a surgeon, a healer, think about it. What do you need most? You need sick people. So it's like saying, determined to obtain the greatest possible benefit from all the sick people, to obtain the benefit for you, because they're the grist for your mill, to help you become the best doctor most quickly. So that's the meaning. You want to use all these suffering sentient beings in order to develop incredible levels of love and compassion, so you can become a Buddha, so you can benefit others. That's the logic behind determined to obtain the greatest possible benefit from all sentient beings, because they're the grist for your mill. You need suffering sentient beings. You know, if you want to benefit others, you don't walk behind, you don't go up in the mountains and disappear. You go right down where the suffering is. So you use that to your maximum. That's what the first line means. Then, now, these sentient beings, excuse me, all, who does that include? The pedophiles, the wackos, the evil politicians, the murderers, the greedy ones who don't pay taxes, all the people who are mean and ugly on this planet. It includes them. The term all includes them, okay? Can't pretend. So look at the next line, is outrageous. Who are more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel. Well, forget about a wish-fulfilling jewel. It happened, they used to have wish-fulfilling jewels once upon a time. God Almighty knows when. So why don't you put there instead even a humble number called $1 million. Now look at these words. They are ridiculous. who are more, all sentient beings who are more precious to me, that's what it means, to me, they are more precious than $1 million. Now, I mean, think about this, and it's just plain ridiculous, isn't it? What the hell are you talking about, Mr. Langri Tangpa, the one who wrote this? We think, what is he on about? What does it mean? We can't get our head around it. It sounds kind of cute, you know. Oh, sentient beings are so precious. What do you, I mean, excuse me, precious? What do you mean? Well, what do you mean is this? Because you're trying to become a Buddha. What you need to become a Buddha is compassion and love like bucket loads. And the only way to get love and compassion is to smash your delusions, because they're the obstacle to your getting love and compassion. So all sentient beings includes the wackos, the meanies, and all these verses are related to them. So it's obvious they are more precious to you because they're the method. They're the object of your love and compassion. So to even think like this, I mean, for me, it just seems exhausting to actually think like this. If you said your child, my child, who is more precious than $1 million, that we get, that we understand. Many people would agree with that. But all sentient beings, Mr. Trump, the deluded ones, the bomb throwers, the terrorists, the liars, the pedophiles, the rapists, yep, including them, baby. So that's really, you got to think twice what the hell you're saying when you say these words, you know. It includes them because they are all the object of your ability to have compassion and love, which will smash your delusions. And as you can see for the rest of these verses, the mean people are the objects of this compassion, not the ones who do what you want. They're easy to have compassion for. So these verses are intense. It's only the first 2 lines. I haven't done the 3rd line yet. I will hold them most dear at all times. I mean, I find these words too hard to say, you know, to say them seriously. I shall hold them most dear at all times. I mean, that already, it's obvious Mr. Langri Tangpa is already a bodhisattva. It's pretty clear that he's talking. Bodhisattvas are like mummies and the whole world is their children. If you say a parent and who is more precious, my baby, that we get, will just turn us into all beings. And they're like, that's how bodhisattvas feel about suffering sentient beings. They're their most precious children. And the key quality of a bodhisattva is it's their responsibility. That's, you see, there's different levels of compassion. One is simply called compassion, and that's already pretty incredible. And it's the empathy with the suffering of another, the 3 kinds of suffering, remember? But great compassion is the unique characteristic of the bodhisattva. And it comes after regular compassion. And it's this fierce, determined attitude of it's my job. In other words, you see someone suffering and you go, oh my God, look at that person with a headache. That's terrible. That's compassion. But great compassion is, what can I do to make it go away? That's what great compassion is. And that's the one that the bodhisattvas have bucket loads of. It's like they know their job description. Their job description is to do whatever needs to be done for every being in front of them. And so these verses are the practices we need to do based upon this incredible level of great compassion. So the best we can do is read them and aspire to be like this, if we understand them clearly. Because they're completely opposite to normal life. Completely opposite to normal life, you know. In fact, they're so opposite we can't hear the logic of them unless we think it through, you know. So these levels of compassion are like ridiculous, so intense. That's verse 1. Verse 2. I always joke and say, if you were a therapist and you gave this advice to one of your clients, they could sue you for abuse, for wrong advice, for wrong medicine. You listen to it. When in the company of others, so okay, we are on our own a lot these days, but think of normal life when we're in the company of others and our family and our children and our wives and our colleagues at work and people on the bus and people on the street. Think about it. Think about it. At a party, at a meeting. This is insane, this verse, and they keep getting heavier. Each verse gets heavier. When in the company of others, I'll see myself as the lowest of all. These words are very hard for us. Really quite hard. We feel compelled to put different words. It's too hard. Just culturally, it's just quite hard for us, you know. I will consider myself the lowest of all. But not only that, and then from the depths of my heart, I'll see others as supreme. So this is an intense concept, intense. And maybe in our culture, these words, we'd use different words, but let's just hear them on face value. It's quite hard for us. But as soon as we say low and high, we have a very difficult time with that in our culture, you know, because it assumes you're arrogant. It assumes low, you know, race. It assumes gender. It assumes all. It's a very volatile term for us, low and high, you know. So let's try to understand the meaning in the way it's written in the 10th century or whatever it is by Langri Tangpa. You know? Okay, the theme throughout all these verses, the sole purpose of these practices is to smash your attachment and self-cherishing and anger. Why? Because they are the obstacle in you to accomplishing outrageous levels of love and compassion and bodhicitta. They are what are holding you back from accomplishing your goal of Buddhahood. They are the direct, clear reason you don't have much love and compassion. This is the Buddhist logic. So because on this path, you're in this fierce wish to smash your delusions, because they're the obstacle, because you're trying to grow your love and compassion so fiercely. This is the purpose of all these verses. This is what's behind every one of these practices, you know. So this one is really clear. So let's do the analysis. Why would we need Mr. Langri Tangpa to suggest that we think this way? What does it tell us already about how we think now? Well, that's when the more we understand from doing the wisdom wing work, the more we understand from understanding renunciation, suffering and its causes, the more we're going to see the function of attachment, let's say, which is this main voice of this separate sense of me. So we've got the root delusion called ignorance, ma-ripa. And when it's related to me, it's called ego grasping or self-grasping. And it's this primordial assumption deep in the bones of our being of a solid, real, findable, concrete, separate me. As Lama Yeshe says in his Mahamudra, you know, by positing a me, you're positing other. So that's the universe. That's the universe, isn't it? The world is divided into me and others. And all others, as we can see, are divided into friends, enemies, and strangers, based upon the 3 root delusions. On the basis of attachment, people who fulfill my needs, they're called friends, and I adore them. On the basis of anger, they don't fulfill my needs, and so I don't like them. And the 99.99% of the strangers who are the object of indifference, who neither help nor harm me, so I couldn't care less about them. That's the universe. So because of these 3 root delusions, which we learn about in the earlier stages of practice, they give rise, and this attachment especially gives rise to this very powerful wish to put me first. It's automatic, completely instinctive, totally natural. And so within our models of psychology in our culture, we treat it as something reasonable. And it's hard to hear how it can be a mistake. It seems too weird for us, you know. So this is the assumption behind this point here. So even, you know, when we're with others, we either, what do we tend to feel? If they're all our dear friends, we feel comfortable. But if they're a bunch of strangers, let's say, you know, we either feel very self-conscious, and maybe we have low self-esteem. So we see everybody else as higher than me, but not in a healthy way, not what Langri Tangpa is suggesting. Because in a sense, we're going to hear this verse and we'll say, well, excuse me, mate, I already see myself as the lowest of all. What the hell are you telling me what to do? It's not like that. The way we have low self-esteem now, it's the flip side of arrogance. In other words, if I'm in a group of people and I merely feel self-conscious and I think all these they're richer and more beautiful than me, basically I've got low self-esteem. But what is it? It's the flip side of pride. I'm angry at them. How dare they be better than me? How dare they be richer than me? We feel resentful. That's how we feel the lowest of all. It's not a humble, it's not humility at all. Humility is a very comfortable feeling of genuinely appreciating other people's qualities. But low self-esteem is like very bitter and very self-centered and very unhappy. And it's the flip side of pride. If we didn't have pride and arrogance, we would not have low self-esteem. This is quite shocking to hear. So that's how we feel the lowest of all now, which is not obviously what Mr. Langri is telling us. So this view is an attitude of delighting in other people's qualities. When you walk into a room, if you can delight, oh, look at that beautiful person there, look at that person, oh, wow, that person's so intelligent, then you are delighting in someone else's qualities. That's what it means. You're seeing yourself less and then more, even though we can't hear those words. It's too hard for us to say low and high. We'd say, oh, I appreciate their qualities. Well, that's saying, in other words, you're seeing one person over there and you're hearing them talk and you go, wow, that person's amazing. They definitely know more than I do about mathematics. That's not low self-esteem, that's intelligence. And that comes from humility. Humility is a healthy attitude. Humility is comfortable with who you are and is easy to recognize someone else's qualities and to praise them. That's the way of saying this. So instead of a low self-esteem and seeing everybody, and automatically, even though we've got low self-esteem, it's still very instinctively self-centered. It's self-centered. And we would say in our culture, that's automatic. You know, if like in the sort of, you hear about the, you know, the towers falling and car accident, you know, things happening in fires, people take care of themselves and stumble over each other to get out of the building. We say, oh, that's natural. It's the function of ego grasping, and it's the function of attachment, and it's the function of self-cherishing. And self-cherishing is the term the Tibetans use for selfishness, putting me first. So we're trying to flip that over in this verse. We're trying to put others first. Now, this is the point. If you are still having lots of low self-esteem and self-loathing, this is not your practice. I'm very sorry. This is way too advanced. You've got to start understanding your own pain and your own suffering, develop some sign of self-confidence before you can do this. This is only for really people who've got this, because we mishear it and we become all like a martyr, like a victim. Oh, I'm the lowest of all. That's not what Langri Tangpa is saying. You just get trodden on. That's when you're trying to be mummy's little helper and you try to be a good girl and all you're doing is craving other people's praise and all you do is get stood on and used like a doormat. So it's really, we've got to think this stuff through carefully, you know. The words are too much for us. We've got to interpret them properly. So this practice, how you do it, you just have to think of a person you know. And you think, and it's very specific, you try to think of some one thing that they have or do, let's say, that's better than you. That's better than you. That's this practice. It's very clear. So you delight. Look at that person. She's got such a nicer nose than mine. That person's got much. I know when I did kung fu, I always looked at people's feet. I used to think my feet were the best. I had really good kung fu feet, short and fat. You know, I was very arrogant about my feet. I'm serious. So I was doing kung fu when I was also a Buddhist nun. So I'd try and practice looking at other people's feet and thinking, oh, they've got much better kung fu feet than me. I'm serious. I'm serious. Okay. And it doesn't have to be. You have to show it. You in your own mind. That's the practice. It's very direct, very precise. Delight in someone else's good quality, but it's one that's better than you. And that's the conscious point. Of course, it's not comfortable to see these words so blunt, you know, we've got to unpack it and understand the meaning properly. And you don't misuse it. You don't go around saying, oh, you're so much prettier than me. That's just you wanting more praise, you know. It's a private practice. It's your own business. Okay, so ask me some questions so far. I've said a lot in 1 hour so far. So now ask me some questions, please.
Just a quick reminder to use the hands up. It's easier for us to see.
Yeah, and if there aren't any, that's okay. I'll keep going. If there are, just put your hand up while I'm talking and I'll see your hand. I'll see the little picture. Okay, next verse. This one seems to be, to me, slightly different. They're all related to other people, but this one has just to do with your mind. And this is practice from day one, actually. This is practice from day one. Vigilant. The moment a delusion appears in my mind. So just remember what a delusion is. It means attachment, anger, low self-esteem, arrogance, jealousy, depression, anxiety. I mean, you name it. Our mind is, normally, our minds are flooded with these. So this is already implying quite an advanced person. To say the words, the moment a delusion appears in my mind, is assuming that virtues are the default mode. I'd say it's the other way around for us. But generally speaking, it's staying what the fundamental practice in Buddhism is, which is to watch your mind like a hawk, because a delusion will endanger you and others, and I will confront it and avert it without delay. This is the wisdom wing practice, and this is the practice from here to Buddhahood. That's when we really start to learn to be our own therapist. And if we can do this job, the more we can do this job, the more sophisticated we become at this job, which is pretty profound actually, because it means second by second, then you would be a stable, radiant, joyful, content, fulfilled, happy human being, because you're in control of your mind. And it's extremely advanced, but we can hear the words, they're so clear. So we do our best. Now, verse 4 is heavy duty, verse 5 is worse, and verse 6 is even worse. They get heavier by the minute, and you'll understand my point. And we're back to sentient beings again. So now, I think this verse refers to people in the world out there in general that you just hear about and read about and see. Now, if you can imagine this, Langri Tangpa back in Tibet, even Tibet in the 1950s was like 10th century. You might have seen a crazy person once a year or heard about one crazy person down the road. But look at our world. I mean, there I've been now for 18 months in Santa Fe, which is quite a relaxed place, right? And I think I mentioned, I joked sometimes on the teachings. I went to New York 3 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. And it was like being in an insane asylum. But I don't mind these. I like insane asylums. I like crazy big cities. But suddenly it was like 50 million more people. Everybody, the streets completely packed, which is normal New York City, completely packed with people. Half of them talking to themselves, completely out of their brains. I mean, just normal New York City, which is, I mean, I think if Langri Tangpa suddenly was transplanted to 21st century New York City, they'd all have a mental breakdown. They'd all think they were in the hell realm. They think they come to the wrong realm. Because, you know, you talk about Tibet, even Santa Fe is like a pure land in comparison. You meet a nutty person every now and again, you know. So this verse, it says, whenever I see people, they say evil in nature. So sweet. Who talks that term now? We would say, whenever I hear about, read about, think about, see a psychopath. That's the term we use in the West, isn't it? Who is overwhelmed by violent negative actions. Now wait for this one. And suffering. That's the part that's hard to hear. And that's, I didn't mention that before, as the object of our compassion. That when you understand karma, you see the wackos and the pedophiles, you know why they're doing it. And this is the basis of your compassion. In fact, the Bodhisattvas have more compassion for the wackos, more compassion for the pedophiles and the murderers and the terrorists and the rapists. Why? And this is the point of karma, because they're doing it as a result of their past actions, and every second they're doing it, they're creating the most unbelievable suffering for themselves in the future. That's the basis of compassion, because they're creating their own suffering. They're creating their own suffering. So whenever you think about or see or hear or read about a psychopath who is overwhelmed by violent negative actions, we see masses of that, and who is suffering to that degree, I will hold, it says rare ones, but these days I think it's not rare for us, not in our culture. I will hold such rare ones dear, as if I had found a precious treasure. So again, the logic to here is that because of understanding karma, right back at the beginning, every single person, every action they do, every thought they have, every word they say, they are producing their own future self. So obviously, if a person is overwhelmed by delusions, overwhelmed because of past habits, overwhelmed by the wish to rape or kill or lie or steal or murder, look at the world, they're driven by that habit Look at our pathetic habits, okay? Look at our pathetic habit to eat too much food, to say bad things about our next door neighbor. Look at our pathetic habits, and we can't stop them because of karma. Can you imagine being born with a mind since you're tiny that only wants to torture, for example? I mean, one of my friends in prison on death row in Kentucky. My Buddhist friend there, Mitchell, said, Robina, he thinks of torture all the time. When you understand karma, you know why he's thinking of torture all the time. If you don't have the view of karma, you just think he's an evil person and he should go to hell. We don't know what to do with him, you know. But then when you see your own ridiculous mind, your own crazy delusions, and you begin to have compassion for yourself, which is renunciation, can you only imagine the nightmare, the torture of having been born? Your mother doesn't teach you. You bring this with you. You're a pedophile. You live, your mind is thinking day and night about little children in this intense sexual way. You're thinking of torturing all the time. This guy, I know this guy. He sits there in the teachings, very relaxed, but his mind is like you're attached to food. All you do is think about food all the time. One of the signs of attachment is you think of it all the time. So a torturer, this friend of mine, this guy in prison, he thinks of torture. It's just in his mind all the time, behind whatever he's doing, his talks, his conversations, his eating. It's all the time. That's the nightmare of a suffering mind. And you will not have compassion for that person until you see your own crazy mind and how your thoughts are so uncontrolled. That's the wisdom wing. As if I'd found a precious treasure. Why is this person a precious treasure for you? Because it's demanding this intense compassion from you, which will smash your self-cherishing, smash your attachment, smash your anger. In other words, the person trying to be the best doctor as quickly as possible just won't put a little sign outside their front door and then dispense a few Band-Aids and say, oh, I've been a doctor today. No, you're the one who'll go to the war zones and go to the tent. What's Lou got his hand? He's waving his hand. What for, Lou? You waving your hand at me, Lou? No. Okay. So, you know, if you're seriously trying to be a doctor, you want the most intense patients of all, because that'll be the quickest way for you to become the best doctor in the planet. That's exactly the view here. You won't play safe, in other words. Bodhisattvas don't play safe. That's verse 4. Verse 5 gets heavier. Verse 5, I think, is like closer to home. I would say for us, it's like our work environment, a bit closer to home. When out of envy, others mistreat me with abuse, insults, or the like. So at work, you get accused of doing something you didn't do. People talk about you behind your back. You get, you know, we all know this kind of stuff among workers, among people who work together. It's like a nightmare, like hell for some people. I will accept the defeat and offer the victory to them. So you'll take the blame, basically. This is so heavy, we can't even believe it. We can't even take the blame when we are at fault. This is talking about when you're not at fault. This seems to us, unless we understand this properly, if you're not a suitable vessel, this will just sound like complete martyr victim mentality. And we've got a very strong tendency to be that way, to kind of fall on our sword, you know. We've got to really understand this in the neurotic way. We do it in a neurotic way, especially if we're the victim in a relationship. We're the one who gets trodden on, we get abused, we get blamed for everything. That's not what he's talking about here. This is a powerful attitude, and it's only a brave person who's got a strong sense of self-respect, which is a person who's given up attachment and anger, can do this. But you're practicing, and it's really intense, because instinctively, even when we've been blamed for the smallest thing, we go crazy in our mind defending ourselves, don't we? It's shocking to us to be accused of doing something we didn't do. It's shocking for us. It's so overwhelming. It's like impossible to think that you could take the blame in a healthy way. And this has got to be a healthy way, you know. as a way to smash your delusions. That's the point. I remember always, I told one story years ago. I heard this a long time ago in Australia. A friend of, there was a Buddhist, some Buddhist friends were having some kind of party or something. My friend George was there. And the guy whose party it was, he's telling everybody how his brand new BMW had been scratched. So he had to get a new door. And then it happened again. And he discovered it was the fellow next door. And this old guy, and he didn't know why. He didn't know what he'd done to cause this old guy to want to scratch his brand new BMW. But anyway, he said, well, what am I going to do about it, to these people? And he said, well, some person said, well, scratch his door, call the police. And then George said, I'll tell you what Lama Zopa would do. Lama Zopa would discover what this old guy liked and would buy him a beautiful gift and would offer him the gift and would apologize sincerely for whatever he'd done wrong. Now, John, this guy had done nothing wrong. So this is an added point here. This is how karma works, by the way. In this life, we know some of us have lots of bad things happen. Some people have unbelievably bad things happen. You get blamed, accused. This nightmare some people have, but you've done nothing wrong whatsoever. This is why in our culture, we go completely mad. Because we say, why is this happening to me? We don't know why. There's nothing we've done to deserve it. And that's a very real truth. So when you have the view of karma, everything is different. But this is why it's so hard for us, because we don't remember doing bad things. Well, for that matter, we don't remember doing good things either from a past life. But we don't mind when the good things happen, do we? This is the part about karma that's a very important point. Every one of us today, every second you're breathing still, that you get the food, that people smile at you, that your body's reasonably healthy, that's because of your past virtue. But we never kind of bliss out and go, unbelievable, look at the virtue I must create. No, it's only when bad things happen that we have a panic attack. Why is this happening to me? We don't mind the good things happening. And that shows the hubris of attachment. Because underneath attachment is this incredible kind of arrogance that assumes I only deserve the good things. This is very heavy, but this is what attachment is. And this is hubris, and everybody's driven by it. So when we get the good things, when we get the praise, when people are kind to us, at work someone's kind to you, we drink it up. It's so delicious, but there's an assumption I deserve it. So the degree that we assume we deserve good things is that degree to which we believe we do not deserve the bad things. That's the pain of anger. So the pain, the attachment is the assumption I deserve good things, and we greedily take all the good things. We take for granted every second of any happiness we have. Every second we take it for granted, but it's the fruit of our unbelievable virtue. And if we really understood karma, we'd be weeping in joy every day and delighting in our past virtue. Every time you get a mouthful of food, it's not just accidental. It's not because you're clever. It's because of past generosity. So then we're able to bear the bad things because we know they're the fruit of our actions as well. So this is a heavy duty one, but this is why without understanding karma, all this stuff is useless. There's no basis for any of this. There's no basis whatsoever. It's just weird. You've got to understand karma. So we can see the pain of when bad things happen, the outrage, the anger, the resentment, the bitterness. We go on, and the righteousness that we feel because we've done overtly nothing wrong. But when we understand karma, it changes everything. But you've got to practice every day thinking it through. We've got to practice every day. It's so heavy for us. That's why I always quote those story of those young Tibetan nuns. Tortured, abused, and this, when I mentioned when Richard Gere invited the Dalai Lama to New York in 2003, and then he invited 20 former prisoners, all of whom had done some kind of practice, meditation or something in prison. And then some people like me were invited as well, because we worked with people in prison. So they also invited these 2 young Tibetan nuns who'd been tortured and sexually abused in prison in Tibet. And they were in tears telling their story. But first of all, this is the point that I always bring. You know, there's the other Americans, 20 Americans there, you know, black, white, male, female, a whole cross-section of American society, all talking about their suffering in prison, and prison's bad, you know, pretty suffering. And there's lots of anger, of course. We have anger, isn't it? Because anger is saying what? Anger says, how dare this happen to me? That's what anger's saying. It's an outrage. How dare they do this to me? What are those words saying? I don't deserve it, which means we don't understand karma. So that's when good things happen. Like I said, we take them for granted because we assume we deserve it. But deserve is a very heavy word. It means you've got to create the cause. You don't look in your garden and assume and say, why are there no flowers in my garden? I deserve flowers. Think of the meaning of this, please. That implies there's someone out there who should be putting flowers in your garden. Doesn't it imply that? I deserve flowers. You're sitting there outraged. Why aren't there flowers in my garden? The assumption is you're waiting for somebody, God knows who, to come and put flowers in your garden. But you know damn well, my garden, who puts flowers in my garden? Me. So there's no concept of deserve. In your bank, you don't look in the bank and say, how dare there be no dollars in my bank? I deserve dollars. You don't say that because it's my bank and whatever's in it is what I put in it. So there's a sense of responsibility and ownership. That's what karma brings to our whole life. That's what karma brings. You know. It's enormous. Even as good Buddhists, it's hard to practice this. It's just a profound practice, and it's the basis of the Bodhisattvas and all these practices here. So these young women, these young Tibetan nuns who have the view of karma, that's been in their culture for 1200 years. It's in their bones, you know. That's why they weren't angry, which shocks the Americans. No, we don't trust that. We think they're suppressing. No, because they know why it is happening. And if you know why something is happening that's bad, you don't say, why is this happening to me? I don't deserve it. Therefore, you don't have anger. It's pretty profound when you think about it. They don't have anger. And so then one of them said, and of course, we had compassion for our torturers because we know we must have harmed them in the past. And because we know they will suffer in the future. I mean, this is heavy duty stuff, but this is the substance. This is the background to these teachings. You've got to be a suitable vessel, I tell you. There's no doubt about it. So I think it's time for more, come on, some questions. You've had no questions. I've been talking for 1 hour and 15 minutes. So come on, I want questions, please. Any questions at all? Or is it enough just to contemplate these thoughts? I think we understand them, but they're quite intense. They're heavy duty levels of practice, you know. We've got to be ready for it, got to understand the background to them and take it at our own pace. And if we have, I mean, we suffer terrible abuse in this world. Some people suffer terrible abuse. You don't have to be a martyr. Get as many friends and much support as you can. We need support. We need friends. We need love. We need people to be compassionate to us. But this is the fundamental practice if you're trying to put this stuff into practice.
Venerable Anna has a question.
Yes, please, do ask a question, Anna.
Hello, Venerable. So I'm hearing about, you know, taking the blame. Which is all very well, but what if taking the blame means, say, you lose your home, you lose your freedom, you know.
That's right. That's why you've got to have some wisdom, Anna, to know when it's suitable, what's appropriate. And whatever method you use, you do it with bodhicitta. So if you're going to fight for your rights because you think it's correct, then first of all, don't have any expectations of success. But secondly, do it with the same wish as you would if you took the blame, which is bodhicitta. Of course, you be wise, darling. It's not an absolute answer. It's not a sort of a martyr answer. Oh, I've got to sit here like an idiot. You use your intelligence, Anna.
Yeah.
You use your intelligence.
That's how it comes across. That's how you
Anna, excuse me, it does not come across like that. You're interpreting it like that. That's why I'm giving you the background to it. What? What, sweetheart?
that's how it came across to me. That's how it comes across
Yeah,
to
but I
me.
gave you the background, so that means you didn't hear what I said. And this is
Okay.
why it's so difficult, darling.
Yeah.
But this is the context, everything's contextual. It's like if you're playing tennis and you're only in grade 1, Anna, and I say to you to do a tennis, to do a shot like as if you're in grade 12, you know all you can do is attempt to do it. You don't go kill yourself because you say, I can't do it. You do according to your capacity, Anna. Everything's dependent arising, darling. And that's why I'm stressing continuously the first level of practice. Do you understand me, dear? Or not? It's an important point, Anna. I understand you, darling.
I don't know whether I do. I don't know whether I do.
I can't hear you, sweetheart. You're either my volume's down low or yours is down low. I can't hear. Hang on a minute. Oh, mine's down low. Go on, speak again. What, darling? What did you say?
So say you can't take the blame. You can't take the blame. Say you get because you're going to lose your house. So
no, just stop right there. Wait a minute. Maybe a bodhisattva prepared to lose their house. Everything. Listen, Anna. Do you understand levels of capacity? Do you understand if you're playing tennis, it's levels of ability, isn't it? If you're playing music, it's levels of ability. That's what I'm trying to point out here. This is an advanced practice, honey.
Okay. Yeah, I hear you now.
Up to you, darling. I mean, a bodhisattva, if they're ready for it and it's the right thing to do, they would happily die for someone else because it's the level of practice they're capable of. That's why I keep saying it's an advanced practice, Anna. Don't feel, oh, I can't do that. Oh, I'm a bad person. I've got to fight someone. Don't assume even that the logic you'll lose your house might be. I mean, you don't know that the suffering that the karma you have might be that no matter what you do, you know you might not succeed anyway. Don't assume that doing your best to fight this, whatever's happening for you, you'll bring the results. Don't have any fantasy expectations. It depends on how it depends on how heavy your karma is. But if but still, to do whatever you do it with bodhicitta. If you're going to fight all the way and go to courts and do everything, do it with bodhicitta, Anna, because it's the best thing for everybody. If you do it with anger, you're destroying everything.
Yeah.
Do you see my point?
Yeah.
Do what you're capable of, Anna, according to your ability. This is why I keep stressing these are levels of practices, but we don't hear that. That's why you couldn't hear it.
Yeah.
You understand, darling?
Yes. Yeah. Thank you.
Be humble and reasonable with yourself. Do you understand?
Yes.
Good, darling.
Thank you.
Okay, good, sweetheart. Thank you so much, Anna. Such an important point. In other words, I would put it this way, and another way of putting it, let's say not Anna, but let's say any person, you've been a victim in a relationship. You've been the one who's been like the doormat, people have trodden on you. Maybe your practice is to exactly stand up and say something. You've got to know what you need to do. You've got to know what you're capable of and what you need to do according to your level of practice. I keep saying the same thing. I repeat it, but it's still like Anna said, she heard it the other way. Because we're so absolute about these words, It's a really good point, Anna. Thank you. Who else has something to ask? This is what always comes up with these verses because they're so heavy duty. These practices were kept secret. Atisha brought this approach called exchanging self for others to Tibet, and he kept the practices secret. Because as Milarepa said, whatever is Dharma, the world is the opposite. That's why it's such heavy duty stuff. But hear it so carefully and know the logic of why you would be doing this. Any other questions, please, people? Any questions? Okay, let's continue to the heaviest one of all.
Can I say something, Venerable?
Who is I?
Alona.
Who is the person? I want to see you first. Where are you, darling?
Alona.
Oh, Alona, you want to say something or ask something?
I want to say something. It's that story, Roger's story that you talk about it.
What, darling?
The story about what Lama Zopa recommended.
No, which story?
The friend, Roger friend, who went to the party in Australia.
Yeah, what? George.
George, yeah, George.
Oh, yeah, I haven't finished it. No, I haven't finished the story. I never finished the story, actually.
Oh, okay.
I didn't finish the story. Anyway, I haven't finished that story. I went off and talked about something else. So I'll finish the story, okay?
Yeah.
All right. His name was George. So George said, he heard, and that's what George said, I'll tell you what Lama Zopa would do. He'd buy a beautiful gift. So then John thought that's a great idea. So he went and he discovered this old fellow liked golf. And he bought best quality golf balls, wrapped them beautifully, wrapped them all up and went to the back door, knocked on the door. And then when the old guy opened the door, he apologized for anything he had done wrong. And he offered the gift and asked him to forgive him. Well, of course, John's done nothing. This is taking the blame, Anna. This is interesting. This is an example. John had done nothing, but he decided this is a good, this is easy. He can afford a new BMW anyway. He decided he'd like to do this. So he didn't take the guy to court, which could have gone on for years. He accepted the blame. He bought these beautiful golf balls. He went to the old guy. He said, I'm really sorry for whatever I've done wrong and please forgive me. And he offered the gift. So John felt really good about it. And then he was in the kitchen, relaxing, having a cup of tea. And this old guy comes in, beaming from ear to ear with his gift open. And he said, this is the kindest thing anyone has done for me. Everything is forgiven. So that's something, Anna, the Bodhisattvas, he wouldn't have, if John were a Bodhisattva, he wouldn't have expected it to solve the problem. But in fact, it solved the problem, which is completely opposite to the world. So maybe if it's a court case and losing your child, whatever, that's one discussion. But if it's just in a fight with a boyfriend, yes, darling, you're absolutely right. I am so sorry. That's the level we can practice at. Do you understand? Do you understand, darling? We have to, practice it little bits with the next door neighbor or with somebody's mean to us. Start small, Anna, with the baby things. Do you understand?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah,
just a bell, the ding went off. I really didn't see or get that point, but acting according to your ability. Thank you.
Of course, that's what I kept repeating. That's why I continuously talk about the earlier practice first. Do you understand me? Understanding karma, understanding delusions, understanding what a bodhisattva is trying to do. Even though I've said all those words, it just shows how it's hard to hear it, darling. Any level, perfectly well, if it's a piano, and you turn to grade 12 in the piano book, damn well you can't do it if you're only in grade 1. So your first thought should have been, well, that's a pretty advanced level, but I'm not capable of that yet. Do you see what I'm saying, Anna? That's what you got to say. And maybe it's not even the wisest practice for you. Maybe it is the right thing for you to do, to go to court and do whatever you have to do. So that's where you got to be clear, using your wisdom and your common sense, and do whatever you do with the purest motivation. Otherwise, no matter what you do, it won't work. Do you see, sweetheart? Good, Anna. Yes, Kasia. Yes,
Hi,
Kasia.
hi. Sorry, I couldn't unmute. Hi, Robina. Thank you. Yeah, so this just makes me think, the thoughts, the practice for transforming your mind. And so I have I co-parent with my son's father, and I feel like, a lot of the times I wonder, what is our karma? Because it's constantly just a headache, and I feel like there's just a lot of resentment and anger on his side still for many, many years. And, I used to really pray hard in my practice to just, keep things really harmonious, just to pray that there could be a lot of harmony. And I just wonder, like, when there is a really difficult situation that you can't, just say goodbye to a person, you can't just end something, you really have a lot of karma tied in. I mean, other than purification, like, is there, these practices for the mind, it's just sometimes it feels so hard.
Of course it is. And that's what these practices are, darling. These are exactly those practices. But like, it's difficult work, sweetheart. So the thing is, you see, part of our problem, Kasia, part of our problem is because we're so addicted to wanting to feel good. I mean, it would be marvelous if there were harmony. You can't say that's wrong. It would be marvelous to have harmony. But given that it's not harmony, and given that you have the connection with this man because he's the father of your child, then this is clearly your practice in your face every day.
Yeah.
So in that way, you've got to have enthusiasm for it because you don't have a choice. That's where it's really, so then all you can do, like Anna, whatever, she's got it's her practice. But and the more both you and Anna can work on your minds and do this work at the same, I mean, even Anna, even with yours, still going to court and still doing, it can still be these views. You can still have compassion, know why these people are doing these things, know that you created the heavy negative karma, know that your little boy created the heavy negative karma as well. And this is the same with you, Kassia. Being a mother, you tend to think the poor child, but they created the cause to have this drama as well as you, both of you. So you understand, Anna, your boy created the cause for this as well as you. So don't be sort of over defensive for him and think it's bad because it's the child and they're innocent and that kind of thing. It's not true if you have the view of karma. So this is your practice, Anna. Every bit of it is for you to keep your stability, and you, Kassia, to keep your mind, to be patient, to be humble, to be brave, to be courageous, to give up attachment, to give up anger. It's your practice. It's in your face. So that's what we have to learn, to be glad, because you've got no choice right now. There's no point in resisting it. That just makes it all worse. No point in thinking it shouldn't be this way. I wish it weren't this way. It's like a person who's in prison. They don't have a choice. So you make it your practice and you begin to get a happy mind from this, that you're practicing so powerfully, and you delight every day in your practice. You delight in your progress. Don't just always see the negative and think it shouldn't be this way. Do you understand, Kassia?
I do. And I'm wondering, like, so you're saying to view this with enthusiasm.
You have to, otherwise you go mad.
Yeah.
Sort of like you're in prison and you're wrongly accused, like many people are, and you constantly go on about how bad it is and this shouldn't happen, but it is happening. It is your life. So know you created the cause to have this as your level of practice. So work with it, be happy, but you've got to rejoice in your good qualities, rejoice in doing it. And the more you do that, the more you'll be content within it. And the more you can work, it'll influence the other person as well. The more happy your mind is. See, we tend to be negative, and I bet Anna goes on and on to her friends about the courts and the bad things and the bad person. And the more you do that, the more you poison your own mind, Anna. The more, if you talk about your your husband, Kassia, I'm not saying you do, the more you criticize him behind his back, the more it poisons your mind. So one of your things is to stop talking about him. Both of you. You understand what I'm saying, Anna?
Yeah.
You create your own problem. You create your own mess. It's like someone's who's wrongly accused in prison every day, cursing the prison. It doesn't help anybody. It just makes it all worse for everybody. But you created the cause. When you own it, you don't get angry. Like those young women, those nuns. Do you understand, Kassia? So first of all, shut your mouth. Never say one bad word about this ex-husband ever again to anybody. You will see a big difference in your mind. And I tell you, Anna, if you do the same.
Okay.
This causes so much negativity for us and just drags us down and poisons the whole thing, because it's all the time based on blame, based on anger. Do you understand, Anna? Shut your mouth, babe. You just do the work. It's your job. It's your practice. You created it. So do it with a happy mind. Kassia, you understand?
I do. Yes, that's very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes,
Thank you.
David Lee.
Hello, Venerable. I agree that everything that happens in our life, we're personally, karmically responsible for, and we should rejoice because it gives us a chance to clear up that karma.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly,
But
David.
collectively speaking, if we look at the whole planet,
Yeah.
Here's 5 billion people, who are we going to apologize? Who are we going to love when the whole planet is in this? I mean, just talk about global warming. Who are we going to apologize to for something like global warming collectively?
Well, we've all, I mean, if we've all done it.
People are going to suffer, and there's no one to say, well, I'm going to seek understanding from you by apologizing. I don't get it.
No one's discussing here apologizing. That apologizing isn't part of the thing here. It's not part of the practice. Oh, so I mean, okay, wait a minute. You mean taking the blame example? Well, that's a very specific thing, is when you've been accused of something, you take the blame, you apologize then. That's an individual thing. I agree with your point. But when we understand karma and the whole universe, the whole collective karma of environmental karma of past killing from 1 million lives ago is why we're suffering, why the environment is suffering now. So in those cases, all we can do is have compassion and try to make the environment a better place and try and help others. So it's a different approach for each of these different practices. That just means we just have to have compassion for every single person who is suffering as a result of their own past actions, and they don't realize it. So that brings us compassion and this wish to never give up trying to help the planet become a better planet. The forgiveness one is a specific practice, but not in this case. It's a different discussion, I'd say. Are we communicating, David, or not?
Well, yeah, but individually, I don't know if we can say that every individual on the planet is suffering from their past actions, but
the Buddha would say that.
suffer anyway.
The Buddha's view, all I can tell you is the Buddha's view, David. I don't quite know how you would interpret, but the Buddha's view is that each of us is the creator of our own past. Each of us from our own past is creating our own present. There's no creator. There's no by accident. Things don't happen by accident. Everybody, every second of any happiness that we experience is the fruit of our own past goodness. And every second we have any suffering, that's the result of our own past negativity. That's just the logic of the view of karma that Buddha says runs the universe. It's a natural law. No one made it up. There's no punisher. There's no rewarder. It's just the way it is. That's the Buddha's view. From countless lifetimes, 1 million lives, 2 million lives it could be. I can only tell you what Buddha says. I mean, I'm not saying anything else. I can only quote the teachings I have studied and just quote those teachings, David. That's all I can say. Do you understand, my dear? I mean, you might have a different view. It's your business. I'm just trying to tell you what I understand from the teachings I have heard, how to present what Buddha says, and then the consequence of that. There's no sentient being, the Buddha's view, there's no sentient being who isn't experiencing second by second the fruits of their past actions, bad and good. Every moment of happiness, we created it. Every moment of suffering, each of us created it. Every ant, every monkey, every dog, every human. That's the Buddha's view. We're the creators of our own. Dalai Lama calls karma like self-creation. There's no view of a there's no view of a creator. There's no punishment. There's no reward. There's no boss. That's the Buddha's view. Okay, David? Are we communicating, sweetheart? Good. Okay, people, go on. What else? We finished the verses. The third one. I'll do the third one. The third one. This is the sixth one, which is the worst, the heaviest. It's the closest to home. This is the one. Listen, this is like your beloved child or your ex-husband. When somebody I have benefited and in whom I have great hopes. It's like all the mothers and fathers who come to me in tears that their children have rejected them, or all the wives who've been rejected by their husbands, or whatever the story is. When somebody I've benefited and in whom I have great hopes gives me terrible harm, I will regard them as my holy guru. So that you can still do, Anna. These people harming you now, honey child, due to your past karma, your past actions, they are your most precious guru right at this moment, giving you every opportunity for every imaginable practice, darling. That's the way to see things. This is the deep. I mean, so many parents, I mean, it breaks my heart when I hear about so many parents get rejected by their children, you know. They decide their mother is the cause of all their suffering and they hate them forevermore. It's unbearable, not to mention partners. I mean, people do that, you know, you've been with someone for 35 years and you come home and there's a note, I left you for a younger version, that's it, you know. And because of the amount of attachment and love we have for each other in relationships, and then this whole thing turns around, it's just so painful. Unbelievable suffering. This is such common suffering for the whole world. So the last two I'm going to leave till tomorrow, or till this afternoon. We've got this afternoon yet. You know, I said we'd have, it says in the schedule we've got 2 hours. I think it's too much. I think it's an hour and a half is more than enough. I'm going to stop now, okay? And you have a long lunch break, hour and a half lunch break. We'll come back at 3 or 2:33. Come back at 4 o'clock, okay? I think it's better because this is heavy duty stuff. Come on. And you haven't had many questions, so You had me shouting at you for an hour and a half. All right, sweethearts. So think about it, analyze it, hear the words, and see what we can do to reconfigure the way we see things. All it is a different way of seeing things. That's all, to help us navigate our suffering lives. And it's up to us what we can take on board, you know. So see you in an hour and a half, sweetheart. See you at 4 o'clock. Thank you, darlings. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, thank you, thank you. See you, sweethearts. Bye.
Venerable Robina.
A bit late for you, Masha. You're a bit late for you, darling. A bit late for you, Anna. What time is it where you are? Must be 3. Well, you're not too bad. 10
It's
o'clock.
9:30, so I'll
not too
return
bad.
at 11 p.m. It's not too bad.
Not too bad. And Masha's at 10:30, aren't you, darling? Yes.
It's
And
close,
Alona.
it's close
What?
to 11, and the next hour it will end in 1 o'clock at night. So it's
That's true. So you'll see. Anyway, I might see you later. I might see you tomorrow. Okay, and you and Alona too, both of you. And Caroline, there she is as well. You Europeans. Okay, precious ones. See you. All right. So I think we'll leave the 8 verses now. And we'll just talk a little bit more. I think it's important, you know, to distinguish. Let's distinguish between the, like, you know, one of the biggest problems is when we have attachment for people, we have lots of love and compassion for them. And when we don't see, though, how it's polluted by the attachment. So let's look at that. Let's look at that. This is in daily life. It's so incredibly important to understand this. Forget about the big major things like those intense 8 verses, but it's in ordinary life, you know. Like if we're a parent or we've got a child, or let's say we've got a partner or even our own parent, we really confuse, we really we make a mess of our love and compassion because it's mixed with attachment. So let's look at that. Like I said, you know, the practices we were describing before are really advanced. And that advanced means that you've got, you know, you've done an incredible amount of work on the wisdom wing. You're really very super clear about what attachment and the delusions are, and you're really quite advanced in subduing them. And most of us aren't, frankly, you know, that's already highly advanced. Most of us can't even identify attachment. You know, we don't even know what it is, actually. So let's look at this, okay? So this is right back to the wisdom wing, right back to junior school, like, you know, like the high school, the middle scope of the lamb rib, the first stages of our practice where we really learn to understand our mind. We learn to distinguish between the neurotic states of mind and the virtuous, the non-virtuous and the virtuous. So psychologically speaking, in our culture, to say virtue and non-virtue, you know, we don't talk this way. We just don't talk this way, you know, we just don't talk this way. But it's fundamentally necessary from the Buddhist perspective to understand this approach to the mind. So, you know, negative, non-virtuous, neurotic, deluded, all these words refer to attachment, anger, depression, jealousy, low self-esteem. We know the words intimately. We know the feelings they bring us, you know, there's no question. And then you've got love, kindness, perseverance, compassion, generosity, forgiveness. We know these words as well. But the trouble is, you know, all of our thoughts, like we have 1,000 thoughts a second and they're mixed together like a big soup. And we really literally just can't tell the difference because that's not the way we think in our modern psychological models. We don't think like that. But that's the real skill we have to learn as a Buddhist, fundamentally. I mean, you know, I always quote this, but it's crucial here to understand. Where we're heading is to become a Buddha. So these 2 syllables, Bud implies the utter eradication from our mind of all delusions, all neuroses. I mean, that's a very shocking concept. We just don't talk like that in modern psychology. You'd sound like a mentally ill person if you didn't have some anger, some depression, some attachment. Because in our culture, we give equal status, don't we, to all these different states of mind. Then the da, the second word in Buddha, that implies the development to perfection of all the virtues, which is finally what you're doing on the Bodhisattva path, you know. So if this is true, think about this. If this is the fundamental point of Buddhist, if this is the goal, the long-term goal of a Buddhist is to be completely rid of all the delusions and completely developed in all the virtue, then obviously the job of being a Buddhist is to distinguish between them. I mean, it's hardly rocket science, but this is the hardest job we'll find. Because we don't think this way, and even if we do start to think this way, it's quite sophisticated, it's quite subtle to be able to see each thought moment by moment by moment and distinguish between the deluded ones and the virtuous ones. I mean, this is the job, but it's super difficult. It's super sophisticated. What we can do is, that's why we've got to control our body and speech first. That's why we've got to control our mouth first and not blurt out all the negative words. Then we've got some space to begin to see our mind, you know. So in most of our lives, let's say in our lives, we have relationships. Maybe we have a child, maybe we have a partner, maybe we have a parent, or even just a friend. Well, then inevitably, we're going to have lots of attachment for that person. Attachment is a delusion. This is really hard for us to hear because we give a different meaning to it. Because we mix it with love, we mix it with kindness, we mix it with being close to somebody. We don't give this clear distinction that the Buddhist psychological model does. So attachment is the main voice of ego. The main voice of ego is this emotional hunger. It's totally self-centered attachment. It's multifaceted. Its energy is emotional hunger. Its energy is dissatisfaction. It then what it does, its main function is it paints a very delicious picture of the object, like your child, the boyfriend, the friend, whatever it is. It paints a very delicious picture that's an exaggeration of, so let's say you've got, especially a mother and a child. This is the commonest one. And it sounds very cruel for us to talk this way because this is not the way we talk in the West. So, you know, there's obviously masses of attachment from the time that baby was tiny. For example, you couldn't stop thinking about that baby. Now, I mean, we say, well, of course, I'm their mother. But lots of mothers don't think about their babies. They couldn't care less. That's why the babies die, because there's no attachment. So if you were a bodhisattva and you had actual love and compassion and no attachment, then you'd be the perfect mother. You wouldn't be attached, but you would have, because you have love and compassion for everybody. You'd know you've got a karmic connection with this person, but you'd have incredible wisdom. You'd always make the wise decisions. You'd see their mind perfectly and you'd know how to help them properly. But we've got attachment. Attachment makes us think of them all the time. It makes us feel like they're an extension of me. We feel like we made that person. They belong to me. We over exaggerate their beautiful qualities. We often don't see their mind properly. So it makes, and then of course we also have love and compassion for that child. Their virtues, marvelous, but it's polluted by the attachment. And therefore, we often make a mess in our decisions when it comes to being useful to that child or that partner or whoever it might be, because attachment makes the mess. And the other thing is, when you've got attachment for somebody, it's easy to have love and compassion for them. It comes naturally. And, you know, it's easy to have love and compassion. That's why when we talk about that practice called equanimity, equanimity is like the first practice you begin to cultivate as a basis for building up on love and compassion, great compassion, bodhicitta. So equanimity is this recognition that your beloved, the enemy, and the stranger, from their point of view, are actually equal from one point of view. The friend, the enemy, and the stranger equally want to be happy and equally do not want suffering. This is the fundamental starting point in the whole practice and the cultivation of love and compassion. So we can see right now, you have your beloved, like say you put your child in the friend category, you put your ex-husband in the enemy category, and you put the next door neighbor whose face you hardly even know in the stranger category. So what we're trying to prove with equanimity is we're trying to get ourselves out of the equation. And we're trying to see these three people separately from us, individually, separately from us. So then we're going to begin to recognize that they are equal, in fact, from the point of view of wanting happiness and not wanting suffering. That's what equanimity is. It's the starting point for real love and compassion. But it's enormously difficult because for our, let's say, you know, well, I mean, that's why I use the one example of one person. First is a stranger. And maybe that stranger You know, so what equanimity is a recognition that they are equal to each other from the point of view of wanting happiness and not wanting suffering. Sounds like simple words. So if we use one person, let's say starting off, I always use the same example, like this Fred, who's a stranger. I don't know Fred. And then you're his friend and you tell me about Fred's terrible headaches. And I try to have compassion, but I don't know the fellow. He doesn't touch my life. I try to sound a bit compassionate. Within 3 minutes, I'm all, you know, we're discussing our own business because I don't know the guy. He hasn't touched my life. Now, let's say all of a sudden I meet Fred and we fall in love. Suddenly, and I'm going to move in with Fred. Now, what's going to happen now? What's now changed is suddenly I've got attachment to Fred. The same guy with the same headache, but now I think of Fred all the time. And I've got so much love for him and compassion for him, and I'll do anything for him to stop his headaches. But how come I didn't when he was a stranger? Because he hadn't affected my life. Therefore, I couldn't care. I sort of vaguely know he doesn't want to suffer, but when he's my beloved, everything changes. Now I only want him to stop suffering. I have compassion for him. I think about him all the time, and people think, wow, Robina's so compassionate. Well, she's not, I mean, she is compassionate, but why? Because suddenly Fred is my beloved. Because the only ones we have compassion for right now are our beloveds. The ex-boyfriend whom we adored at one point, who is now our worst enemy, we not only don't have compassion for him, we actually hope he suffers. So what's it based on? Totally on me. We should be embarrassed at how self-centered we are. So we only have love and compassion for our beloveds, and we think we're so special because of it. Why do you think some mothers let their babies die? We think they're monsters. No, they just didn't have attachment for that baby. I think if you didn't have attachment for babies, most babies would be dead. Because it's so incredibly hard to have genuine love and compassion for somebody. But it's easy when there's attachment, and we mix them together. So that love and compassion I've got for Fred, all of a sudden he's my beloved, is really superficial. It's all contingent upon him fulfilling my attachment's needs. And as long as he does what I want, I'm prepared to have love and compassion for him. But look what happens when he starts to cheat on me and chuck me out for a younger version. My love and compassion turn off like a tap. I mean, it's shocking, actually, because our love and compassion are contingent upon attachment. So it shows how self-centered we are. Of course, it's shocking to talk this way, but because Buddha's view is quite radical, you know. We just go, oh, it's normal. Yeah, it's called samsara. That's why we suffer. I mean, you know, we might have ex-partners who are now terrible to us. Well, excuse me, where's your common sense? How come you fell in love with the idiot? But you did at some point, you fell in love with him, and now you're blaming him for being wicked. Well, if you had any common sense, you wouldn't have fallen in love with an idiot. You would have seen his qualities clearly. But when you've got attachment, you're as blind as a bat. And then you blame the ugly boyfriend for being horrible. Well, he was always horrible. You didn't see it. So don't blame him. Blame yourself for being foolish. Blame yourself for having attachment. Blame yourself for all your emotional neediness, for him to think you're gorgeous. And then because he's upset you, you hate him. I mean, we should be taking responsibility, you know. Attachment's the problem. It blinds us. It makes everything all crooked and wrong and upside down. And it pollutes any good qualities we've got. We need to see this, you know. Oh, of course, it's intense. It's the Buddhist view. So the Bodhisattva is a person who has given up attachment, who's given up anger, given up jealousy, depression. They're really advanced beings, you know, and their mind has only got space for love and compassion. There is no space for anything else. So their love and compassion is just stupendous, and it's completely rooted in wisdom. The way we talk about love and compassion now, because it's polluted by attachment, it's completely weak. It's sentimental bullshit, you know. Real compassion and real love are grounded in wisdom. They're powerful. They're wise. That's what the love and compassion of Bodhisattvas is like. That's what we're trying to cultivate. Wise compassion, wise love. Because it's based upon you seeing their mind and understanding that person, you know. But now our love and compassion is completely based on attachment. So it's just limited. Because of it, it's limited, you know. Of course, it's where we're at, it's how we are. We've got to recognize it and then aim to grow in this direction of being a bodhisattva. Read the teachings, think about it, read those 8 verses occasionally, aspire to be like this, aspire to have that kind of wisdom and clarity and courage. One step at a time, you know. So I'll use this simple example of, let's say you've got a brother who's an alcoholic. It's a simple example. You love your brother. You've grown up with this little boy who's now a big man. You know his heart. You know his good qualities. You love your brother. You do love your brother. You have compassion for your brother. But look how it pans out because of attachment. You see, the attachment part of us is needy, is emotional, is I-based, self-centered, it's neurotic, but we don't recognize it. So there's your brother, you know, alcoholic brother. Yes, you have compassion for him. Yes, you have love for him. But what you don't see is all this attachment, and the way attachment pans out here, attachment at the most primordial level is attachment for everything to be lovely. We want everything to be lovely. We want everything to be nice. We want everything to be nice. This is our deepest attachment in one way. It's like, forget about attachment for approval, all those different things, but that's very much part of it. But the biggest one of attachment is I want what I want every second, which means I want things to be the way that will make me happy. So from the point of view of attachment, your brother is a pain. He's causing you incredible upset. He's upsetting your happiness. He's causing mum and dad to be upset because you feel responsibility for mum and dad. So you criticize your brother and you're all upset about him, but you think it's compassion. It's not compassion. It's called anger because your attachment's not getting what it wants, but you've still got compassion for him. So you rush off to try to help your brother. You give him advice. You always tell him what to do, and you think you're being compassionate. No, you're just doing what your attachment wants because you want all the trouble to go away. And then you blame him when there's troubles. You blame him for problems. So if he does what you want and he goes to AA and he stops drinking, then you sort of feel, oh, how wonderful. But what if he falls off the wagon? You get mad at him again. And finally you give him up because he's not doing what you want. That's what attachment's role is. Now, if you only had compassion and no attachment, you'd see him for who he was, you'd have wisdom, you'd understand his mind, you would know that he doesn't want your stupid advice, he's not ready for it, you'd love him for who he is, and you'd mind your own business. You'd have great compassion for him, but he's not ready for your advice. He hasn't asked you for advice, so there's no point in shoving it down his throat. Half the time, that's why when we think we're trying to help people, it's just coming from our own attachment. But we think we're being so compassionate. We're not. It's just attachment. Then we're sticking our nose in where it doesn't belong, you know. So our compassion mixed with attachment is a mess. It causes us to make a mess. But we don't see that. We don't even distinguish them, you know. That's why love and compassion, love and attachment are so close together for us, we don't even see them as different, but they're completely different states of mind. Attachment is totally self-centered, neurotic, I-based, needy, expectation, possessiveness. All of that is attachment. Then you have some love, which is may you be happy, but it's completely polluted by our attachment and we don't even see, you know. This is why the Buddhist view is so specific and what we need, if we want to be Buddhist, we need to study it, at least superficially know the difference, first theoretically, between the delusions and the virtues. It's very specific in Buddhism, you know. You don't understand it, then you don't know how to practice. How can you? If your job is to distinguish between delusions and virtues, if you don't even know the difference, first theoretically and then experientially, how can you possibly distinguish? Which is exactly what practice is, day by day by day. This is the bottom line practice from here to Buddhahood. So if we've got somebody we're responsible for, like a child, you know, it's a huge job because so much attachment involved. And let's say, you know, like, you know, for someone, Cassie's example, or Anna's example, they're both different examples, but Cassie is, you know, talking about how she's got this ex-person who's the father of her child, and it's just difficult. It's just plain difficult. So, when there's attachment there, sometimes it's easy to, especially for the child, we feel kind of bad because the poor child has to put up with this dreadful husband or dreadful father. And we feel, but I mean, again, like I said, if we understand karma, the child created the karma to have this parent. The child created the karma to have all this disharmony. So it's painful, you protect them, but there's no benefit in thinking, oh, that horrible man, look what he's doing to us, look what he's doing to my poor innocent child. That child created the cause to have that parent. They created the cause to have this break in the family and disharmony and things, So you don't, you protect them, but to have I know I could see with my mother, she had 7 children. We had quite a few problems in the family. She'd always overprotect us. She'd overprotect us. And that's attachment. And that makes a mess, That makes a mess. You overcompensate all the time for our mistakes, for example. I know I was a naughty girl. I didn't study. My mother was always feeling sorry and feeling guilty because she felt she was the problem, and then feeling sorry for us because there were dramas and fights in the family. So she'd overcompensate. And in the end, she didn't help me at all. I always remember one time, it sounds so silly, I hadn't done my homework. But my mother was overcompensating because of the problems and feeling guilty that she was responsible for it all. She did my homework for me. She wrote this poem that I was supposed to write. And she put in a word that the teacher knew I didn't know. So, it got me into trouble. It didn't help me at all. My mother was trying to help me, but she was overcompensating. That's what attachment causes us to do, Attachment can't see things properly. It exaggerates, it distorts things. This is basic practice. Well and truly before we get to the more advanced stuff, like in those 8 verses, That's a heavy level of practice. And the other one is to continually to remember, which is so difficult for us, like I said before to both Anna and Kassia, that when we understand karma, even superficially, even to understand, Kassia's example, her experience, this is her life. But we tend to think it's wrong. It shouldn't be this way. So we're always finding fault, always being angry with it. But somehow, that's just an assumption of attachment that only wants nice things. It's just our practice. It's the way, it's like being, it's just the way it is. So when you learn to know this is your life, Anna, for example, whatever her problems are, this is the life that she created. No one dumped this on Anna. Yeah, there are people being mean to her, but she created it karmically, and her little boy did too. When we know this makes us strong and powerful. We take responsibility for it, and then we greet the problem, and then we work with it and try to fix it. But when we're always angry with it and always criticizing, always blaming, like being an innocent victim, it just drags our life down. That's why I said to both Kassia and Anna, one of the practices is shut the mouth. From this second, stop saying bad things about that ex-husband. This will alleviate so many problems, I swear. And that's just the speech, Like I've got a friend in prison who's getting out soon. He's been in since he's 14. He's now 40-something. He's really worked so hard. And of course, the prison system is a nightmare. Everywhere there are obstacles. There's no support. There's nothing. It's a fact. But all the time in his emails, and I said, you've got to stop saying negative words. You might be right, but every time you say a negative word, it blocks you. It makes you more upset and you more angry, and it makes you feel like a victim. Stop saying the negative words. It's not helpful. It's not helpful. See this as Kassia's life is her life right now. This ex-husband and her child and the scenario, this is her life. She created this. Anna's life is her life. Whatever the problems are, she created them. So when we own our life, when we own the problems, and we see it very, very differently. So you get more courage, more optimism, and then things are more likely to succeed. But we can't, when we start to see that the victim mentality is the character of attachment and ego and blame. It's the character to feel sorry for ourselves. It sounds very brutal talking this way because life is very tough. But if we can change that voice, everything looks differently, and we have more courage and we have more confidence, and more optimism. It's quite hard because bad things do happen. But the assumption of anger is, how dare that happen to me? I don't deserve it. When we begin to look at attachment and anger at that level as an assumption, it's quite subtle that attachment is a deep assumption that I had only deserved the good things. And anger is an assumption that I do not deserve any bad things. And in each case, like I said before, the assumption of deserve implies somebody out there doing it to us. But in Buddhism, there's no creator. It's quite a profound view. We create the cause for our own experiences. So owning them, even the bad ones, is 90% of the problem. Resisting them is what causes the pain. You know, resisting them is what causes the pain. Accepting it. This is my Kassia. This is my reality. And it's sort of like you've got a road with all these potholes. You've got potholes. It's your road. You've got to be careful. That's also all these obstacles you've got in your life are like your potholes that you created. So you work with it. Instead of resisting the potholes and cursing them, you welcome them. This is just practical. It's common sense. Any of my friends in prison who are doing really well have got that attitude. This is my life. This is my reality. Let me make the most of it, you know. Criticizing it all the time, negative all the time, angry all the time, it just destroys us. That's what causes our suffering, you know. Of course, it's hard. Life is tough. There's no question. But that's why it's courageous, even that level, just welcoming the bad things, meaning I can't change it right now, but this is my life. I've got to work with it. That's welcoming it. Thinking it shouldn't be there and how dare it be there and this shouldn't be happening, that's pushing it away and you just create tension. You go nuts. So I'm saying different things. I think I need you to ask me some questions. I'm running out of voice. Come on. Anything there, Sheila?
I'm not seeing anybody.
No. Okay. No questions, darlings? Nothing. Yeah, who's the hand there? Mikkel. Yes, talk to me, my dear.
Hi, Venerable Robina. Thank you for wonderful teachings.
Oh, happy to see you. Talk to me.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask you, I have been through some of those processes you described, like losing contact with a child and things like that. And I've actually come to a place of acceptance and found some very big gifts in that process. So I was just wondering, is it part of Buddhist teachings that if we welcome the suffering, like you say, you know, is it part of Buddhist teachings also that then inevitably always wisdom and good things will come out of it?
Yes,
if we go
no question. This is a fundamental point, Mikkel. It's a more advanced practice, but sometimes we're thrown in the deep end. Our life gives us these problems, and this is the miracle. This is whether it's like a person like your experience, and there's so many, especially fathers in this position. My friends in prison, let's say, was wrongly accused, and you're going crazy. But when you start to give up the attachment and the anger, which means you start to welcome it, then you see it differently. So suddenly there's opportunity for everything becomes different. Everything changes when we can do that. The Buddhist way of putting it is when the mind is mainly attached and angry, the mind is constricted and narrow and tight and you can't move. But when your mind is more accepting, your mind is more open, you're more compassionate, you're more aware, and you can just see things better, and everything good can only come from it. There's absolutely no question. Even if it's not what you wanted, you see it. Like my friends in prison, I have so many examples, people who really worked on themselves and changed their way of experiencing this nightmare to the point where they didn't suffer any longer. And then because they kept their sanity, they began to become more happy. And then they were able to do things that you can't do if your mind is going crazy. If you're angry and tight, you can't do anything because your mind is set in stone. So the Buddhist approach is the delusions make you miserable, tighten you, squeeze you, and are full of despair. The virtues are more spacious and wise, and everything is possible when we start to see things in that way. Yes, exactly. So well done, Nicole. You're very brave. You're very courageous. Excellent. That's the essence of it. This is the essence of really Buddhist practice. You know, and we're familiar with it, and we can see, and lots of people don't have to be Buddhist to see this. We can see it. I mean, always I quote one of my friends in prison who wasn't a Buddhist, but she just was profound in the way she was able to welcome this nightmare that she was in and stop resisting it and stop being angry with it. That's the way to put it. Then you can see it differently. You don't become passive, you become more powerful, and then you can find good in it because your mind is open to it. That's the point. That's the point. Well done, Mikhail. Congratulations. Good. Who else, my dears?
Hi, Venerable Robina, it's me.
Yes, darling, me. Hello, me.
What's been really helpful for me, because I need to learn how to zip it and shut my mouth too,
Right.
is the practice you've been leading, the blessing of the speech.
Yes.
I've always read it, but I never really knew how to chant it or how to enunciate.
I understand.
Several times a day, I listen to the YouTube, and it has helped me tremendously.
Good.
Because I feel like if I can't control my mouth, how can I control my mind?
Precisely. That's the whole point. Yeah.
So I just wanted to thank you that has helped me just in the last 2 weeks immensely.
Amazing. I'm so happy. And it's a very, see, that's the thing, Mary. I mean, it's a very, you know, like what Mikhail just said is talking about his attitude in the mind. What we're describing to Kassia and Anna is the mind. But there's one of the speech. I mean, let's just talk about it for a second now that you brought it up. It's something huge. But again, in our culture, we don't distinguish levels of practice in terms of controlling your body, controlling your speech, controlling your mind. We don't talk like that. We just think of myself as a big lump of me kind of plodding through life. So I've got to control me, we say, but it's quite specific to see these different areas of ourselves, you know, and as they say, you know, that body and the speech, what you do with your body and what you do with your speech, your body and your speech are the servants of your mind, basically. And I mean, we don't think like that, but if we analyze it, it's completely obvious that what comes out of your mouth is obviously in your mind. But I mean, it's sort of like a revelation when you start to understand it. And then when we realize, of course, the mind is the point. Everything comes from the mind, but let's control the servants first. That's a good start. So we can just zip our lip when it's in an inappropriate time and when we would normally blast things out, 90% of our problems would stop. I mean, relationships with people who live with each other, parents and children even. I mean, it must be, especially with a parent, it must be unbelievably hard to really know, to control your speech, to know what to say that's wise for the child. But 90% of the problems would be solved if we could do that. I mean, why do you think people kill each other in relationships? Because we can't control our behavior, you know? So it really is a powerful one. And if we can see it as a very specific practice, and that one of blessing, like you said, that meditation we do, and really focus on it, and then make decisions every morning. I'm going to watch my speech like a hawk today. And that means even not just not saying mean words to somebody, but not just rabbiting on. Often we just rabbit on. We're compelled to talk, you know. So controlling that is so beneficial. It's so powerful, Mary. So I'm so happy that's having a benefit for you. That's wonderful. Well done. Who else?
Venerable, I have a question.
Yes. Good, talk to me.
The things I struggle with of I get uncomfortable in the moment and then I start vomiting.
There you go. No, that's very common, isn't it, Shayla? That's
Yeah.
very true. You're feeling self-conscious and we are compelled to have to talk. No, it's a very strong impulse, isn't it? So then what do you feel about that? What do you think? I mean,
Well, I had never really thought anything of it.
I know, I understand. That's right, isn't it? So, I mean, yeah, I mean, there's on the one hand, if you're with somebody and you feel compelled to talk, it's okay if you try to make it kind and, you know, you try to be kind. So at least if you're going to do it, be kind to the other person. How are you? You know, and say nice words. At least that's okay. I mean, maybe both people can feel uncomfortable, but often it's just uncontrolled because it's compulsion. And especially you see it with groups of people, we're all shouting on top of each other to be heard, you know? So, but it's good to be conscious of it. Yeah, to be conscious of it is really just good, and to notice it, and to be aware that it's, you know, maybe coming from self. It's true. It's coming from it's sort of like it's like we're all self-conscious. We're all wanting. You see, attachment. The deeper attachment that's quite subtle to see behind all this is the craving to be seen as a nice person. So because and even shy, a person who's shy, that's the same problem. A person who's shy is self-conscious about being in a situation where other people are seeing them. So it's always coming down to how we're seen by others. And much of the talking we do, I mean, we don't even notice it because we're so used to being all this social talk and being clever with our words. But it's very compulsive. It's very impulsive. It's true. All of us, I think all of us in one way or another feel this, you know. But I think if at least we're going to talk, make it useful, make it generous for the other person, not just blur about ourselves. At least that's a benefit there. Help the other, how are you? And ask the other person. I mean, sometimes people can do that also though as a defense because they never want to talk about themselves. They're always running the conversation. So we just got to be aware of where we're coming from, you know, Shayla. It's a good point. But it goes very deep. I mean, all this stuff goes quite deep, I'd say, doesn't it? Thank you for that. Yeah. What else, people? Dearest ones, any questions about distinguish between delusions and virtues? That's the big one.
I have one, Venerable.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. Sort of the opposite side of that. How do we deal? So myself, I get anxious when it's silent and everybody's being quiet, and it kind of drives me crazy and makes me angry, and I just keep talking because I guess.
No, I know that's a bit the same. It's a little bit similar to what Shayla's saying. I think we all feel that. I think that's really true. And there's so much, we're so unconscious with what we're feeling, and we're so wanting to be seen as a nice person and sort of feel this overdeveloped sense of responsibility to kind of manage it all and run it all. You know, that can be very strong. And it's quite a difficult one because we've all got it. We've all got it. At least be aware of it. And even if it is silent, to notice what's happening in our mind, although it's very stressful. I know it's quite agitating. It's quite interesting, isn't it, when we're together in groups, you know? It's quite interesting, especially if it's strangers. I suppose that's what you're talking about, when it's strangers, isn't it?
No, it's more like people that are close to me that talk.
Oh, okay.
And then all of a sudden, like, it just reminds me of a snake, or you know, sometimes you can feel like if you're going to get robbed or something like that. There's a lot of silence around.
Okay.
Right. And I'm kind of a street smart guy. And so like if I'm with my girlfriend and then all of a sudden it's just quiet, and then I'm supposed to be patient, and I'm supposed to be understanding, and I'm supposed to be loving, and I'm supposed to be all of those positive attributes. Are you talking
about her silence being kind of like resentful or angry silence?
Well, I don't think it could potentially be that, but it's more like, I don't know what's going on. And I think that's what's resonating with what we're talking about here, is that I don't really need to know what's going on. I just need to like calm down a little bit and realize that it's not all about the way you
respond. But it seems to me what you're talking about here, the silence of your girlfriend. I mean, if it were comfortable, if it were just you're in the house and she does something and you do something else, that's quite comfortable to be silent. Sure. So the silence you're talking about sounds to me like she's angry or something, and so she's not saying anything. That kind of silence.
Yeah.
And that's what's stressing. Well, that's true. That will be very stressful. So that's where you've got to, that's a good one. You've got to that's where, because we're so desperate for the other person to be showing nice things to us that they're not, so we have a freak out. We completely have panic attack. I think there's a very powerful example of giving her space, back off, mind your own business, and let her be what she wants to be. But the trouble is, when it's relationships, we take it all so personally. We want it, then we get mad. But I mean, that's an example of let her be, give her space, 100%.
Because a lot of times I feel like if I talk, then that's me not running away and I'm being present for the situation. But the other person's not feeling that way, and they really want me to do what you're talking about. Yeah, and I don't.
That's where you've got to have enough wisdom. But I think because it's a romantic relationship, and we're so nervous about what the other person's thinking, unless they're smiling at us and saying lovely words, we're going to feel uncomfortable. But that's where it's like that's what a function of attachment is. Attachment is always looking at her, checking up to see what she's saying and doing, and making sure that you're doing nicely. It's like you're wanting approval. This is very deep, Dylan. But that's the kind of situation you've got to give a person a break. You've got to leave them alone. Just leave them alone. I mean, it's not to be passive aggressive, but to just let the person go through what they're going through,
And looking in hindsight, and then I'm done. If I'm not able to leave, it's just one room and it's a lot of tension. I can leave, sure, I can leave physically the room, but I can also, with these teachings and what we're talking about, I can also leave and stay in that room.
You know, you could if you, yeah, but it is not, I mean, it isn't easy. I mean, we know how difficult it is in any kind of relationship, even a colleague at work, and something can go wrong. It's not easy, Dylan. It really isn't easy. It's really not easy to know what to do. Even we're so self-conscious. So you sort of, then you're worried about being misinterpreted. If I walk out, I'm being seen as this way. It's not that easy, Dylan. And we can only just be conscious of it. But I think when another person's being silent and they're working on their own stuff, just to try and let them be, you know. And even, I mean, walking out sometimes without being aggressive about it is like, oh, I got to go to the toilet, you know. Be kind and give the person space to be on their own. Okay, they could also walk out themselves. It's up to them. It's not an easy thing, Dylan. It's like a minefield, these relationships, and that's because of our own stuff, you know. So not easy work.
Well, my last comment is that in that situation, I have a choice to either be quiet as well or to say stuff. And I've been listening, and the fact that I said stuff was not a good idea.
There you go, then. That's right. Yeah. That's the one. I
Thank
think,
you.
yeah, I think it's, yeah, and it's, yes, this goes real deep stuff. I think sometimes silence is the best, but kind silence, you know, kind silence.
Kind silence.
Something like that, and not impatient, not, you know, I mean, it's not easy, but at least you're conscious of it. Well done, Dylan.
Thank you.
What else, people? Talk to me, sweetheart.
I have something, Venerable.
Good. Talk to me, Victoria. Vicky, darling.
You have been, you know, you gave me such good advice when my younger son, Paul, was going through all manner of things. And you told me to stay out of the way. And I did. And that's been very, very good. So
good.
He's doing well. And but now my older son doesn't want anything to do with me. And so I'm doing that. I'm not contacting him or pushing him.
Yeah,
He's almost 40.
Oh my God, he's mad at mom now. He's kind of mad at mom now.
I think you know, I have a lot of attachment and attachment to things running smoothly,
of course,
you know, like all those things. But I feel really fine about just leaving him alone.
There you go. Well, that's really important. That's really good, darling. And let him find out what he has to find out about himself, you know.
I don't think I can help.
No, you'd be about the last person to help him right now.
You're right. Of course, you're right.
I know, you've got to leave him alone. But with, you know, but and it's got to be just completely calm, kind silence, not like passive aggression. Absolutely.
And that's the thing too. I think I need to be very careful of how I'm thinking about it.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Try not to project too much. Try not to analyze too much what you think he's going through. Just leave it alone. Just leave it alone, and just, you know, try to have positive thoughts and see what happens. It's up to him.
Thank you, Venerable.
Well done, darling. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Good. What else, dearest people? I mean, having relationships with human beings, I think, is the hardest job in the universe. That's why we've got to start in our own mind. We've got to start on our own mind, you know. And that's why, you know, I think in the West, we tend to think, you know, it's like everything has to be sharing. So you share your therapist, you have all, I mean, it's just endless, you know. Whereas I think we've got to do the space, we've got to have the time on our own. We've got to see our own mind. It's just so clear. I think the way we define ourselves, even in the West, is as social beings, and we grow up as in relation to others. But that's why this view in the Buddhist one is we've got to do the inner work. I mean, that's why in your own house, if you're living with other people, you've got to have a place. You've got to have a place that's your own. And the child as well. Children, I think, is another whole discussion. I always quote about our family. We had 7 siblings, and we had a lot of children in very few years, and we never had any money. So we shared beds, we shared rooms and beds. So there's 7 little volatile children together. I mean, of course, it was dynamic all the time, shouting and yelling and fighting. What do you expect from 7 little human beings? So to have space, so you can begin to find out what the hell's, I always talk about that. When I was 12 or 13, it was really naughty. I was always naughty. And I always thought of myself as naughty and angry, and I was. But I was so naughty, I was, you know, trying to seduce the greengrocer's son. And my mother sent me off to boarding school. She was so shocked. Well, I became a saint overnight because the conditions changed. It was a miracle. I didn't know what I was missing. I mean, because I was sharing beds and fighting and yelling with my sisters. I didn't know what I was missing. I didn't know I needed space. But suddenly my mother sent me to the boarding school, to the nuns. I went to mass every morning. I had my own bed. I had my own little place. I did my own study. I had discipline. A whole new Robina developed that she didn't even know about, because the conditions nourished that part of me. So we need to have our own space. I mean, it's such a cliche, but it's profoundly true. In the relationships, we need to have space. We just need to. But in the romantic notion, and then everybody being poor, you're stuffed on top of each other 7 days a week, and you wonder why you have problems. I mean, it's too much to expect ordinary people. I mean, we're not bodhisattvas. We need our own physical space of some description or other, to find out what the hell is going on in here and to work on it. It's so unbelievably necessary, you know. I don't think we appreciate this in our culture. I just don't think so. That's what I always say about my friends in prison, all my Latino gangster friends. They only knew the streets of Los Angeles. They only knew the gangs. That's all they had. And then they are sent off to prison. Suddenly they become these marvelous practitioners because they've got space to look into themselves and practice where they never had it before. And, you know, so the better part of you comes out. So if you can shut your mouth. See, that's one of the other things. Shut your mouth, like we're discussing with Dylan, or, you know, with Vicky. But the other thing is, like I said, both to Cassia and to Anna, stop saying bad words about these troublemakers. And they are troublemakers in your life, but stop criticizing them. Shut your mouth. Stop talking about them. That's one of the things about, for example, you know, the alcoholic brother example. All you do is you talk about him behind his back. You talk about him to your mother. You talk about him to your father. You think you're being so compassionate, but you're just painting a big picture of this poor brother. Give the man a break. Stop talking about him. And the other thing is, this is something powerful when you're with other people. You might see your alcoholic brother, but you know the man. You've known him since a little boy. He's got good qualities. They're still there. So talk to the better part of him. Don't always talk to the alcoholic. You paint the picture of an alcoholic, and that's all you see. So Anna with her ex-person, or Cassia. This is another thing, Cassia. Are you there, Cassia? She's gone. Cassia's gone. Oh, she's still there. So, or you, Anna, the same. Start saying good, tell yourself good things about this person. Start telling yourself, in other words, start painting another picture with more things in the picture than just his bad qualities. Start painting a different picture, and then you will begin to see a different person, and you will talk to that part of that person, and then things will start to change. This is huge. You don't be foolish and sentimental and see things that aren't there, but we've got very narrow views of everybody, especially people who are our trouble. You know, we have very narrow views of them. Change our view, see the good things, and then get some wisdom. And then choose our words so carefully, but don't talk about them behind their back. That is a major, major, major one, you know. A major one, I tell you. But be wise, see what the problem is and try and solve it. Yes, Cassia.
So, yes, no, I mean, this is really helpful advice. And it's, I mean, I'd be lying if I said it would be easy, because I think co-parenting, even with living with a partner who you love, it's difficult.
Exactly.
But I don't, and it's challenging. And, you know, I know my son is loved, and I try to remind myself he has 2 loving homes, people who support him. Yes. There's a lot of toxic manipulation that, you know, gets put on him. And I get so angry, and I know that. And it circles and circles and circles. And so
give one example of what you mean by toxic manipulation. Give an example.
So I know that I'm a teacher, and I'm sensitive. I work with young kids. So I know I'm really sensitive to language, especially with kids, but there's a lot of, manipulation of, things that his father will say to him to make him, do things, or to make him, like during during like the height of COVID, kind of when it was first starting, you know, telling him like my son was going through, he was having panic attacks and having a lot of anxiety, and we were working with this therapist to help him with that. And he was feeling really nervous leaving the house to go to his dad's a lot. And, you know, his dad would say to him, you know, it's really not good to be as close as you are to your mom. It's not a healthy bond. And so
How do you know he said that?
My son would tell me these things.
Okay, so this is where, okay, I hear you. So this is
Yeah.
where you have to also know that's what I meant before, that your son has got the karma with this man in his life. It's his karmic appearance that he created to have this man in his life. I know exactly what you mean. So you're going to react and whatever. So then maybe what you've got to do, be really wise and, you know, discuss it with him. Well, what does he think he means? And what do you think? And try and lessen your own fear and your own aversion, you know, because that's his mind. That's this man's mind. That's what he's like. That's what he does. You can't stop it. But you've got to also honor your son's intelligence and allow find ways that he can discuss these things with you reasonably, and not you then buy back into manipulating your son to think bad things about his dad. You've got to allow him the intelligence to hear these things and then find a way to allow him to think about it and discuss it and come to his own conclusions. And that's where your practice is. But know that he's got the karma to have this man in his life. You know, I know you know that, but that's a powerful point when you get it. So instead of getting angry, I know it's easy to say this, then you just discuss it with your son. That's interesting. What do you think? You know, make it very rational and very open. So he's not afraid to, because if you get angry, then he's going to be afraid to tell you things and he doesn't know what to do. He's trying to make you happy. He's trying to make his dad happy. But if you make it really open, and you treat him with intelligence to get his view about it, I mean, that's a really powerful thing with children, I think. Do you understand?
Very much. Yeah, I do. Yeah, thank you.
Good. Well done, people. Well, we've suddenly got 10 minutes left. 10 minutes left. Maybe we'll just have a very short break tomorrow. Maybe half an hour break's enough. We don't need an hour or even an hour and a half. I mean, maybe you do. What else, dearest ones? So just say some things you've learned. Okay, anybody want to tell me what they've learned tonight? Anything good that's been useful for this afternoon or tonight? Say something. Come on. I want to hear some views, please. Catherine, what have you learned, precious? Tell me, darling.
Hi. I'm in Spain right now.
Oh, well done. Good on you with your flamenco teacher.
Yes.
She dances flamenco, Catherine does. So you're with your teacher. I'm so happy for you. Wow.
Yeah.
How long have you been there?
A little more than a week, the Friday before.
And how long are you staying?
I got here. I've got 2 more weeks, so 3 weeks total.
Okay, good. I'm very pleased. So what have you learned today?
Well, I understand, you know, I've been, you know, we're in the situation we're in because we created it, and, you know, whether it's good, bad, both, all of that and everything. But it's so hard because I understand the karmic causes, but it's so hard because that's from, you know, somebody else created that for me now, but I have to deal with it now.
Sure.
And I just have such a hard time with that because
I know, but then I know the only way to think about karma, I think, is it's a bit like when you're 5 years old, you did certain things, and now when you're 45 years old, you've got to deal with it. You're not the same person in the same sense of past life. If you're going to deal with karma as a philosophy, you've got to think of it as a continuity of you. There's no point, there's no benefit in thinking another person did it like it's got nothing to do with me, because everything you are in this life, Catherine, is the fruit of what previous people did. You're not some separate entity. It's a continuity of you. It's the only way to think it. Then you can own it more. Otherwise, it feels very alien, like someone's doing it to you. Do you understand?
Yeah.
If you're using the view of karma, and I know that you're a Buddhist and you do use it, that's the only way to make it work. Otherwise, it's weird, you know.
I mean, I can totally appreciate all of the good stuff I have for the good stuff that I did. You know, that was.
Yep, that's okay.
I feel connected to that.
But not the bad.
I don't feel
Okay,
so
well, that's
connected to the bad
So
stuff.
you look in your garden and you love all your flowers and you own them and you're happy to know you planted them. But who put these weeds in my garden? You got to own both, baby.
That's the hard pill to swallow.
It is, darling. I know,
for
but
me.
it's because it feels like because you've got guilt, because you think, oh, I must be a bad person. That's a wrong conclusion.
Well, it also is bringing up, you know, for me, just a lot of regret, but not guilt. I don't have a lot. I'm not, guilt isn't one of the things I go to, but, you know, just like.
Well, that's good. Regret is good, though. Regret is good because you own responsibility for it. Well, look, I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't realize I planted those weeds out of ignorance. I was foolish. So it's kind of like it should have kindness to yourself, because if you'd known, you wouldn't have done it. That's the attitude. It's got to be kind.
Yeah.
It must be. Otherwise, it's very painful. You understand?
But I'm just ready for it to end, you know?
Oh, no, that's
like,
that can't do
I don't know how long it's going to go on.
No, waiting for it to end is no good. You got to embrace it. Like we're talking with Mikkel. When you embrace it, everything looks different. When you embrace it, everything is different. It's much more powerful. Do you understand, Catherine?
Yeah. I don't like it.
I know,
I
darling.
understand.
I know. I understand. Thank you, Catherine, sweetheart. So who else has something to say before we finish in 5 minutes? What about Caroline? Do you have something to say? What have you learned tonight? Anything at all? She's in Belgium, so she wants to go to bed soon.
No, I'm awake. I'm still awake.
Okay, wonderful. So what have you learned tonight, Catherine? Anything, Caroline? What have you learned?
Well, I think I'm very fortunate that I'm living alone.
Yes, I think you are too. I agree with you.
Oh my God.
It's true. No, it's
Wow.
true. It's true. It's very true, Caroline. I know.
But then on the other hand, I'm not being triggered that much, right?
I know
Because
it's true, but you know, that's okay. Time will come when you got to go out of your retreat mode into your people mode, then you'll be triggered. That's okay. When the time is right.
I do go out a lot.
Maybe what I'm meaning is maybe the style of your life will change, where you'll have to do things for other people. You'll be working with other people, you know, so that'll come, and then you'll be ready for it. Don't worry about it. It's okay. Good. Anna, you're doing okay, Anna? You learned something tonight, Anna?
Hello, Venerable. Yeah, I think I am guilty of, like, as you know, rabbiting on and, blah, 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 it's very difficult, I'm representing myself in all these cases, and
that's right.
I need to be careful who I speak to, yes. Maybe speak to my legal advisors only about, the characters of these. Right. Exactly. And, I do appreciate the good qualities, and I'm so pleased the father has my son, because he could have ended up with God knows who, I do see the, the good qualities in this, and I take, I take opportunity and, some wisdom, but I think, the main thing for me, and the most helpful thing for me, and the most kindest thing for myself, is to zip it.
Zip the lip,
and if I do have to speak about these people, do speak about the good qualities, because they both have massively good qualities. Right, they really, really do. Not take it so personally. I do understand it's my karma and my son's karma.
That's right.
And I have, to a great extent, boxed that, that corner of my life is there, and I have my own, which is massive. Exactly. And I do use these experiences. I've built groups, I've built connections, I've gone to courts, I've gone to services, to discuss about these experiences, and this collection of women and men who've experienced the same as me. Yes. And actually, I've actually come away from that, because that was becoming too intense in itself. So I've left that to some. I've kind of given that to somebody else.
Good.
And Now I'm learning to be a crane driver. So
There
that's
you go. Well
something
done.
completely different.
Good on you, girl. I'm happy. Well done, Anna.
And when I do think positively, do you know,
All of them do.
literally the food does run up the hill to me. It
There you
is
go.
so
That's
bizarre.
It's very true. Well done, Anna.
But
Okay, I'm
yeah,
very happy.
I
Good
just
job.
need to, keep on
Well
that.
done. Keep
Thank
on
you
with
very
it.
much.
Thank you,
Very
darling.
kind.
What about
It's
Lou?
tough, but very
What about
kind.
Lou? Have you learned anything, Lou, tonight? Nothing new for you tonight?
Yes, my greatest desire ever since I got into Buddhism was to become a Bodhisattva.
Wow, amazing.
And or at least aspire to be a Bodhisattva.
Good,
And
amazing.
it's quite the haul, isn't it?
It is really, Lou. Absolutely. It is
it's
really that. Exactly.
it's probably not going to happen in this lifetime. That's for
No,
sure.
but we can aspire and have big thoughts and have brave attitude. Have the brave attitude of the Bodhisattva, Lou. It's a sense of responsibility. It's very courageous, and it makes us feel strong. It's good. It's good. It's good, Lou. Well done. So we finish with that, darlings. So we'll see each other tomorrow, and we'll see what we'll talk about the last 2 verses of the 8 verses, and we'll discuss other things. So I think it's the same timing. We'll do 2 to 4.
Actually, Venerable Robina, the workshop tomorrow is scheduled from 1 to 3 p.m. Mountain Time. That's the whole session.
Oh, okay, fine. That's enough then. That's good. Okay, good. So I'll see you then tomorrow. 1 o'clock, or it's 9 o'clock in Holland and Belgium, and 8 o'clock in London, England and Liverpool. There you go. Okay, precious ones. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Dedicate, be delighted. We've sown all these marvelous seeds in the mind, and may they continue to grow. May we have confidence to see things differently. To see things differently. We'll talk about that tomorrow. Okay, darlings. Thank you so much. Goodbye and good night and good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, precious. All of you. Bye.